uh, is that an advantage to MTO, or are there some other advantages to even using MTO, or is stock just the better way to go?
Yeah, well, first of all, and again, this is Jake, the presenter.
Okay.
Just to clarify my statement just a little bit, I didn't say you should always use make to stock. I said that's my preferred way unless there's other reasons. So there are certain situations where it may be a good idea to use make direct, and there are a couple situations where you must use it. Okay. The one place where you must use make to order, and actually I should probably clarify that right now. The basic English definition of make to order means I make it when I have a sales order demand. Epicor uses the term make to order, but they really mean make direct, which means that on the job, the demand link is specifying the sales order, and the system is basically forcing you to take those parts when they're done on the job and put them directly onto a sales order shipment to sell that or to ship that customer order. If you happen to receive that job into stock and you don't immediately ship that sales order, the next MRP run will create a whole new job to make more because it wants to have a job tied to that sales order.
Yes.
Okay? If you don't have a part number for that specific thing that you're making, then it must be make direct because I can't put it in inventory without a part number. And that's a scenario where you may want to use your make to order / make direct. Now, if you're selling something that is such a one-shot deal that you don't even want to create a part number to clutter up your engineering database, on the sales order you could just give a short description in the part number field, and then you must create a make direct job because there's no part number, no part revision to get the details from. I can't receive it into inventory. As soon as I'm done making it, I have to ship it.
Huh, okay.
If you happen to use the product configurator, which I don't think you do, but if you do, no, that also forces it to be a make direct.
Yeah, we don't use that.
Yeah. So an example, again, in the furniture industry, we had something like 64 million possible panels for an office cubicle with all the combinations of sizes and colors, and we don't want to create 64 million part numbers, so those would have been made direct. And when you get a particular sales order and they specify the width, height, and color, then you just put that in the comment or the description on the sales order and then create a specific job that the part number on the job just says panel, but the description describes exactly what that particular panel is supposed to be, but you never put it in inventory because it's the same part number as a different panel that's totally different in color and size.
Okay.
Now, an advantage of doing the make direct is because you've got the sales order on there, you could do queries like, what are all the jobs in the plant that are going on this sales order? And because they're linked, you could easily pull all those together. If it's made to stock, the system really doesn't know which sales order those 20 pieces are going to. All it knows is that you have a job for 20, you're going to put them in inventory, and then you're going to ship them out on a first come, first served basis. If you only have one sales order and it's for 20 pieces, you're pretty darn sure that that's the job that made them because I only made 10 this month. I received them in inventory and a day later shipped them. You're pretty darn sure, but I can't go into the system and say what job shipped that sales order. If it's not made direct, it says I don't know what job. All I know is I pulled them out of inventory.
Yeah, okay.
I do like, if you can, to either do all one way or all the other so that the people at the end of production knows whether they're supposed to do a job receipt to inventory or whether it's supposed to create a shipping document.
See, that's been the big bugaboo here. When they get through on the boxing table, they get confused as to, am I supposed to receive it to stock or not?
Right. Now, if the job traveler is with that product and on the job traveler it says this is for a warehouse, you do a job receipts inventory. The job traveler says this is for sales order 2518. You create a shipping document for sales order 2518, but you don't always have that traveler when the materials arrive.
Yeah, and even our traveler has the customer name on it, which is the key to them, that it is a make to order. But even at that, we have instances where they'll do a receipt to stock in error, and it's not bad now. They've gotten used to it and hadn't caused confusion. I think the worst thing that we got into from going to make to order is the definition that we were given that had to be a make to order sales order could have multiple releases on it. So we could get a multiple release where we're going to ship one immediately, we're going to ship one next month, and we're going to ship one the month after that. We had to put up make to order racks to store the stuff in while we're waiting for the next release. There's no visibility to that stuff. So.
Yeah. Now you could have, in that scenario where I had 3 different releases, you could have a different job for each release, or you could have one job for the whole quantity, and it'll be tied, its due date will be the first release, but you're not supposed to receive them in inventory. So like you say, they either stay in WIP for 2 months before you finally ship them, or you create a customer shipment pack and you don't mark it shipped for 2 months while you're waiting for the ship date. And that's not very.
In that case, if you have multiple, like it really does depend on how you're going to manufacture it. If you are going to do the whole run, Larry, in that case, if you're going to make it and store the next 2 months and then ship it to them when they're called for, if you want to kind of eat up all of your setup in that first run, you could set that up as a make to stock and certainly put that in stock and then ship from stock. I mean, because the only demand is going to come from that one customer, I'm assuming. So you could do that.
Yeah, that was our.
Then you would have visibility.
Yeah, a lot of people get hung up on the make to stock, thinking that they have to forecast it and put some in inventory before you get the order. And you don't have to do that. It's a stock part. Its minimum inventory is 0. If I don't have any sales orders, it won't create any jobs. It's only when I get a job, and if you don't have order multiples or things like that on the part, it'll order just what you need to ship. And it'll be scheduled to hit the warehouse the day that you ship it.
Yeah, yeah. Okay, very good. You kind of confirmed our original position on it to begin with. Secondary question for you, an unrelated question. Brian mentioned yesterday that the method tracker was now in the menu. One option that's used here every day by a lot of people is part transaction history. And you got to go through another screen in order to get there. You can't get there off the menu. Is there any way to get that on the menu so you can go directly to that option?
I'm thinking there may be, but I don't know what it is. And the reason I say that is for many years, people said you couldn't put the method tracker there either. And the first person that I saw that could do it was somebody at one of the EPCOR user groups posted how to do it. My background is manufacturing and materials. I'm not a technical background, so I don't know specifically how they did that to get it on the menu, but it may be possible. But unfortunately, I can't answer that.
Okay, all right. Well, if your background's manufacturing, you know you use that sucker every day.
Oh yeah, yeah. I would say that probably the top 3 that I use are time phase, part tracker, part transaction history.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you, fellas.
No problem. Okay, guys. Well, let's get started. And I think, Jake, we're going to go through creating a build today. What are we doing?
Yeah. John, why don't you describe the scenario?
Currently, right now on EFG Berea system, we have a bolt and a washer that get assembled and they get put together. One of the washers is purchased. The other one is made while we are, well, the idea is to make the washer and the bolt at the same time, then bringing them together as a thread rolling operation So we put the washer on the bolt, and then they get knurled so that the washer stays on the bolt. Currently, right now, they have it set up as the bolt is a finished part. We're trying to bring in the washer, and they're trying to put them together and order everything is like a sub-assembly, but I know that it's not necessarily supposed to work like that. You're supposed to have like a part number just for the bolt itself, a part number for the washer, and then the finished part code should be the bolt with the washer both put together on that build, or that method of manufacture, correct? Well, currently, they have the finished part number, and they're trying to join the washer in, and they want to that same part number of the bolt. They don't want to change it. That's currently the way the system's set up. I'm trying to figure out a way that we can do that. It's not necessarily the right way to do it, but I know they put an order against the bolt. The bolt gets made, and then that's the final number for the bolt.
Okay. And I think I need to see it the way it's structured to fully understand. I'm having a little bit of confusion when you're saying bolt, if you're referring to just the bolt or the bolt with the washer.
Yeah, I sent a message to Deanna, but she hasn't answered me yet. What did I do with it? I guess the easiest way to describe it is, say this would be the bolts right here. Let's, hypothetically speaking, this is the bolt right here. And what they would do is they would head it, they would trim it, they'd wash it, and before we thread rolled it, right here at this thread roll 10 operation, at this point they want to put in a washer so that the washer gets used on the thread rolling operation, and it gets thread rolled on so that when this goes to heat treat, the washer and the bolt are going to heat treat at the same time.
Okay. And your materials here are what? The 1090?
This is the steel. This is all the forming needs for the heading operation. And this just looks like a trim die for the trimmer. Okay.
Okay, so if the washer is going to be added to this assembly at operation 40, you would have another material for that washer.
Now, would it be, because one of the washers is purchased, one of the washers is manufactured.
Okay, now is it two washers on the same assembly?
No, there's two different part numbers, two different
Deanna's
versions.
calling in.
Huh?
Deanna's calling in.
How'd you get a hold of it? That's amazing. You can get a hold of it, but I can't.
Well, she was green, so I was there. So we'll wait on Deanna.
She can at least tell me what the number is, and I can look at the actual bill. But that's the idea of it, and we want to make sure that, you know.
Deanna, is that you?
That's me.
Excellent. So, Deanna, we are talking through with Jonathan a scenario that you guys are struggling with. And the reason we're doing it here is because on the engineering side, we're trying to understand how the right bill of material and so forth, router even, needs to be set up to really address that issue. So, Jonathan has described it, but needs a little more help from you, part numbers, so that we can look them up and kind of look and see, and everybody else can see at the same time what we're trying to address. So.
Okay, so the first part is the 9168. That one we make the bolt, but we purchase the washer from Prestige. So that washer gets purchased outside of the facility.
So this is a bolt with washer purchased outside.
Yeah. Then the other part that we have is the 8109s. We make the bolt, and then we make the round bushing, which is the 7507. And you need to make them at the same time and have them heat treated at the same time, so when they come back, you can then assemble it.
So we want to combine we want to do the rolling of the knurls in the washer after they've been heat treated.
Yes.
Oh, I thought it was before. My bad.
Yeah. Yeah, those are both heat treated. On the 8109, those are both heat treated before they go and get assembled, and then they're plated afterwards
Okay,
when they're assembled.
What's the final finished good for the?
The final finished good part number is 8109.
Well, no, that's okay.
See what I mean?
That's
Therein
because
lies. Okay.
no one knew how to set this up correctly, so
Okay.
it was.
Well, that's why we're going to do it today.
Yeah. So really, the finished good part number should be the 8109, and
Or
then
should
the
it be the
bolt should have a
9168?
different part
No.
number.
The 9168 is the part that uses a purchase washer.
Okay.
Yeah.
The 8109 is the one where we manufacture the
So,
system.
Assemble it.
so let's look at the
Both
purchase
of
one. Yeah, let's look at the purchase one first, probably because it's already on the screen. So if you could open those operations and materials there. Okay, so I'm assuming the 1680W is the washer?
Yes.
Okay, and if you highlight that, it says the related operation is 40. Right, so this looks to me, the way I understand the description, is a proper setup. You're going to do the first three operations, the third operation being an outside. When it comes back from the heat treat, you then pull the material of that 1680W and add it to the parts that have come back from the heat treat, and you do that final assemble and plating and pack. And when the system schedules the job, the washer, the 1680W, is scheduled to arrive in the plant at the date that you're starting operation 40 rather than the date you're starting the whole job. Okay? Now, if you want, you can add a receiving time to that part so that it would be delivered X number of days early, before that, so that just in case there's a inspection problem or a late delivery, you won't have the problem. But I think that's functioning. Do you have any issues with this particular part?
That one, I don't think it's such a problem because we get the notice to order the washer in enough time.
Mm-hmm.
I think the one that we have to make simultaneously, where we have to make the 7507 and the 8109, that's the one that we have the difficulty with, because really you have to have them on the machine at the same time. You can't make the 8109 first and then get triggered to go on to make the 7507.
Okay.
Deanna, the 9168, do we, like Jake had said, do we want to put a earlier receiving time on it so it gets ordered a little bit earlier? Or has it been working out just fine where we get it, on a normal basis, we get it at the time that we want it?
Well, quite frankly, I think we need to put it in earlier, because the only reason those washers were washed because I know, or ordered, was because I knew we needed them. So if I'm not here, I get hit by a bus, someone else has to know to order these. And where that shows up on a report or who's looking for that is, does it show up on a requirement report?
Well, it should be on your purchase order suggestions.
Right now at this facility, I don't think anybody's using that purchase order suggestions at all.
Right, right. Now, if you happen to look at the time phase inquiry, it would show there as well.
Right.
It would show that, again, we're looking at the method rather than the job, but let's say Operation 40 was scheduled to start on June 1. It would say that on June 1, you're going to pull 1,000 of these washers out of inventory, and you don't have 1,000, so you need to buy some more.
Okay, so I guess one of my other questions is, and I don't think it's currently happening, is when the guys are putting the washers on the bolt, I don't think any of this is ever getting removed from inventory.
Yeah, if the washers were set up as a backflush part, they'd be removed from inventory when you reported that you did Operation 40. If
Is that how it's?
Well, again, I don't know right now if it's set up as a backflush. If it's not set up as a backflush, then someone has to do an issue transaction through that job.
All right, so that's something else, Jonathan, we need to look at how that's set up.
Yeah, go to the plant tab. And yeah, the back flush is not checked here.
Okay.
So the way it's set right now, someone has to issue those washers to the job, otherwise they won't come out of inventory, and you won't get the cost on the job either.
Which I currently feel that we're not doing that, so. Okay, because then you would do that same thing with on that other part, because I always wondered how we got that bushing out of the inventory, because it was always sitting in the inventory.
Right. Now, when you say bushing, that's the thing that you're making, right?
Right.
Yeah. If you wanted to build that on a standalone job and you just relied on scheduling that job to be done at the right time, the method would be just like this, except that it would have a bushing instead of the washer, and it would say manufactured type instead of purchased.
Okay.
But it sounds like you really want that to be a subassembly so that it's easier to coordinate the dates to make sure that they're done at the same time on the same machine.
Yes.
Would it, if we set up the manufactured bushing, if we set it up the same way this one would be set up, and a job was created for the final part number, would that job number carry over to the bushing that's being made, or would it be a separate job number to have it manufactured?
If the bushing were set up just like this, where it was a material being added at Op 40, then you would have to create two jobs. Creating the job for the top level would not automatically create a job for the other. If you set it up as a subassembly, it would automatically be on that same overall job number, but it'll say that subassembly 1 is the bushing, and subassembly 0 is, or assembly 0 is the top level part. The disadvantage you get in that is it's always telling you to make the same exact quantity bushings as the end item, and it's never going to consider any kind of inventory availability for that bushing. So if by chance you want to make that bushing in a larger quantity, you can't do it as a subassembly, and maybe you never want to do that. But you know, it's possible that the machine that actually makes those bushings, it makes sense to run 10,000 at a time, and you're only making 5,000 of the top level assembly bolt. So that's the drawback you have of a subassembly.
But if that lower level part, let's say the part you're assembling the other part to, has that set up as a material, and the lower level part is a stock, you set that up as a stock part, and you put min maxes on that, then basically it would draw from that stock into that, and then into the main part, and then at the same time, and you could issue it into that part, and then at the same time that lower level part would automatically refresh itself with inventory because it's got a min-max.
Yeah, that would theoretically work. The only thing is that when you create the job for the top level part, and whether you create it manually or whether MRP creates it, that would blow down to that part number for the bushing, and we'll say, okay, I need 5,000 of these out of inventory. And if I've got 5,000 inventory and that part is still above its min-max, it won't create any jobs for the bushing because I've got enough already. But let's say I didn't have any bushings at all. It would create a different job with a totally different job number saying, I need to make 5,000 of these for inventory. And the start date, or excuse me, the required date of that bushing would be the same day that the job is supposed to start on the operation for the top level bolt assembly. But because it's at the part level planning through MRP, it's not going to be down to the hours, it's just going to be, I need it that day. And if I reschedule the top level job for whatever reason, it's not going to automatically move the bushing with it. It'll now give you a message saying, oh, because I rescheduled the bolt job, you now have to reschedule the bushing. And if a person reacts to that message and does it, everything is cool. But if they don't do it, you could go to start running that assembly and you don't have the bushings anywhere because the bushing job still has a different date on it.
Yep.
And that'll be another job that has to be firmed, released at the end. It eventually has to be completed and closed. Whereas if you had that bushing as a sub-assembly on the bolt job, then I only have to firm and release the bolt job, and when it's all done, I only have to close and complete the bolt. Right, finish good bolt rather than two jobs. So there's fewer jobs in the system. It's easier when you're rescheduling. It's easier when you're creating it, but it's a little bit more difficult on the inventory planning because I have to run the same quantity, and if I happen to have excess, how do I do it now? Do I have to manually go in and modify the jobs to say, well, on this particular job, I don't have to make 5,000 bushings because I've already got 2,000. I don't have to make 3,000 more. And then you've got the system thinks, well, why are you trying to complete the operation when you've only run 2/3 of the quantity?
Mm-hmm.
You know, so you sometimes get into that issue.
Go back to this purchase washer here for the lead time then.
Can I have, go ahead. Is there a difference between the washer and the bushing?
I ultimately don't think there is, except for what it's called. There might be a little bit of a difference.
Because you guys are confusing me when you're calling one a bushing and one a washer. They're both the same part. My question is, why would we differentiate the two?
I don't know, because originally when they were set up, that's probably what they told them.
Right. See, I assume that there's something physical difference because otherwise you wouldn't be buying one and making the other.
That is true. The washer is an actual washer, thin washer that you could buy at a store. It has certain requirements. The bushing is actually made on one of our machines, and it's thicker, much thicker than the washer for the other part. So it is two distinct different parts.
So the finished assembly of either washer bolt or washer bushing are two separate finished good items.
Yes, because
Yeah.
the bushing is different. You mean washer bolt.
What did I say?
There's a washer bolt and a bushing bolt.
Oh, washing bolt, bushing bolt, two finished goods, separate.
Yes.
Two separate orders. Okay, gotcha. I was under the impression. I was under the impression that we making or purchasing the washer to be assembled with the bolt in the rolling process to create one finished good. That's what I would thought we were doing. But now I understand we're actually making two finished goods. The one is a purchased subassembly or purchased washer that gets assembled with a bolt.
Yes.
The other one is a bushing that we make, which isn't really, it's a thick washer, I understand that is now rolled with the bolt and affixed that way.
Yeah, as far as the system planning and such goes, I don't think that the purchased washer being added to the bolt is technically any different than putting a label on a part at the end or the box to put it in.
Exactly. The same thing.
You just buy it at the right time.
Issue it at the right
job.
operation.
You may want to consider back flushing that rather than having it set to manual issue, but other than that, I
So
think the planning is the same.
at this point right here with this purchase washer, so that we receive the purchase washer sooner than what we usually do, this lead time I would want to put a number in, correct?
No, it would be under the planning tab, and it's called receiving time down at the bottom.
Right here.
Yep, receiving time. If you put a receiving time of 1, then the system says it takes 1 day between when the product hits the dock and when I'm going to have it in the inventory ready for manufacturing to use it. Okay?
Okay.
The due dates are always the end of the day. So if you didn't have any receiving time at all, the purchase order says they're going to use it on June 1. So the PO is due on June 1. So the supplier thinks they got to the end of the day on June 1, and that job may be scheduled to start at 7 o'clock in the morning. So I recommend having at least a 1 day so that the purchase orders will be due the day before manufacturing uses it.
Okay.
If you have a slower process, you have receiving inspection required, things like that, you might want to make it 2 or 3 or 4 days. If you have a supplier that is often a week late, you might want to put it 7 days so that we tell the supplier, you know, it's kind of like,
We're due
I
a
don't
week
make-
ago.
yeah.
We don't tell them that. We just say that.
If you have a significant other that's always late, you always tell that person that the
Church
party
starts at noon.
starts 2 hours earlier or something.
Church starts at 9.
Yeah.
Mother-in-law.
I once I took an extra day off at the beginning of my vacation because we're going to hit the road early in the morning, and it was 4 in the afternoon when we
I
finally left the
found
drive.
that out on weekend.
Anyway,
So Deanna, for a receiving time on this, how much time do you want to give? Is the day fine, or do you want to go 2 days?
I don't know.
well, one other option here is that if you have a whole class of parts that you want the same amount of receiving time, you can put it on the part class. So you don't have to do it on
Well, I
every
think-
single part number.
I think this is we only have 2 numbers that do this, where we have to put a washer or a bushing onto a bolt. So this is kind of a special case item.
Right, but do you have,
Think of other things.
you know, do you have any purchased items that you want to make sure that they're scheduled at least the day before you need them?
That's a question for Deanna.
I mean, we're going to, technically we're going to be getting rid of any of the buy-sell stuff that we have, but we do have a few that we probably could use that for.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't know what.
Well, I know you can kind of keep that in the back of your mind. I know that we've got sometime in the future another workshop on MRP and inventory planning, and that'll be a big
No, I
discussion
don't
at that point
I'm
too.
sure.
Okay.
And that does apply to manufactured parts as well as purchased. So you can have the jobs required a day or 2 before the sales order if you want.
Okay.
But again, what I would suggest is we look at that assembly then that uses the bushing, and we can build 2 methods, one where it's a sub-assembly and one where it's a pull from stock, and we can create a couple jobs, and you can see the differences that you'll have on the planning side for that. And that'll help you to make a more informed decision what is the best way to do it. But I'd like to maybe start with saying how is it structured right now, because you may be doing one of the 2 methods already, so then we only have to simulate the other one.
Which it seems like this one's right. It just needs a little TLC. I think it's the other one, the manufactured one, is definitely where we're having our issue.
Yeah, I would guess the purchase side's probably pretty easy.
This is the other one.
The 8109 and the 7507s are 2 different bills of material, and they don't ever intersect, I think. Those are the 2 part numbers you want to look at.
Yeah, what is the 70 whatever?
7507,
That's the bushing?
that's the bushing. So you need to have that generate for the MRP, so steel gets ordered for that, and then you get it on the machine. And then the 8109 is the finished good product,
Right.
which
So
is
the
made on the
8109
whole maker.
So right now the 8109 doesn't even have the 7507 on it.
Nope.
Right.
So how would you know to use it? People are just issuing it?
Just because we've had the knowledge of this is what makes up this part. You know, once we get an order for the 8109s, I know that I need to make the 7507s. That's why I talked to Jonathan about trying to get this in on the bill of materials, because if I get hit by a bus, no one else would know to order that additional part
Okay, gotcha.
or make it.
Now,
You keep saying you're getting hit by a bus, yeah.
That's a big buck.
I was going to say, you struggling with going across the street now.
I am. I run a lot. I run across streets a lot, and people don't stop for pedestrians.
Okay, so before we leave this part, is this method correct for just making this bushing?
Yes.
The N5OD is the right operation, and 1033 is the right material. And I'm assuming that that material 20 is the phantom for the.
Yeah, this is these are all the parts needed for forming it.
Okay.
So yeah.
Okay.
So
So
both is correct.
So we probably don't have to do anything with the 7507 other than adding it to the method for the 8109. So I would suggest we create 2 revisions for the 8109, one of them with the 7507 as a material and one with it as a subassembly. And then we'll create a couple jobs and see the impact.
Okay.
Okay. So you can, however you want to check out the 8109 to the engineering workbench, or you can go to the part first and create the, actually, you don't need to create a new revision if you just want to create a couple of alternate methods. And then
Hey,
that
you guys
way-
still need me?
I don't think so. I think we're okay.
Okay, if you need me again, just let me know.
And Deanna, we'll try to get the bookings back on there for you. I don't know why they went away.
No, he got, Sasha did it, so I just thanked him for that. They're back on there. I don't know why they were taken off.
Yeah, I don't know. That was a mistake.
Okay,
Okay, thanks.
thanks, bye.
I would call it something like SB, and this would be the one where it's a subassembly, and create another alternate method called MTL, and that will be where it's a material.
So you can select an alternate method when you're releasing the job.
Yes, when you're manually creating a job, you can select an alternate. The MRP is always going to create the
Based on the
primary. So if I got a message, okay, it's time to firm this job, and I look at it and say, I really want to use an alternate, I could either totally delete that job and manually create a new one, which is probably quicker, or I could firm that job and then delete the method and then pull from this alternate.
What is that out method that exists at one plant, but she doesn't exist in order? Like we talked yesterday,
Yeah.
we would create out method for each plant,
Right.
and that method is specifically to the plant. Will it pick up that method, or will try still to pick up the parent?
Yeah. On the part plant planning tab, on the part maintenance, you say what is the primary alternate for that plant, and that's what that MRP uses.
Okay.
If you later change it and you want to pull from a different method, you want to make sure you choose an alternate that belongs to that plant. So we ran the problem yesterday. We didn't get the error until we tried to schedule the job.
Right.
Right.
Let us create it, and then we tried to schedule it.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know anything about like
I don't know why you don't get the message.
We had to-
for
yeah.
material, the restriction for because the resources don't
Don't exist.
share the plant. So
When you go to schedule, it's limiting it to the resources in the plant. You can't find the resource there.
Right. Well, we had a very
I
select
don't know why they
material
can't do
side.
that check when it creates the job.
We were saying the same thing. We said that's just ridiculous. That because when you don't see it, MRP you don't see it. Well, you do. It's in the log, but it's too late. At that point.
That's why Dean Smith is doing when he got a basketball coaching.
We can.
Okay, so this is the way it's set up right now. So let's go to highlight the next one down. It's called material. And this is going to be pretty easy to set up. Right-click on materials and say new material, or add material, 7507. And in the operation, you want to put in, I think, 40s? No, not 40. Where's this going to be added in? Top 30? Handle, yeah, top 30. Okay. So then you just put a 30 in the operation rather than 10. Yep, right there, make that a 30. Okay. And we use one per parent, I'm assuming? Okay. Hit save. And now go to your revision list and highlight the SUV alternate. And add material. And again, it's 7507. Related operation is 30. The only difference, putting a 1 there, yep. And then this next block down, check the full edge assembly. Okay. And then save that. And approve all, check in all.
Let's keep your down. So you're just going to pull it in as a.
So yeah, so
No,
basically
no,
what we
no.
said is we now have told the system that when you get to app 30, you also need a 7507. So I know I need it. But on the first alternate called MTL, I'm pulling it out of inventory. On the second one, I'm going to make it on the same job. So there's going to be no inventory netting. But when I create the one job, it's going to automatically basically
Create a
take
job.
the job for the rest. It's the same job number, but I automatically have it in the schedule to make it, and I'm automatically recognizing that I need the material for the bushing as well as the material for the.
But this doesn't create a separate job.
This one isn't a separate job. The other one would.
Right. I want.
Short break, because he's going to want to see what we do here anyway. So, okay. For those of you online, good time to grab some coffee. We'll be right back.
Yes. Yes, I'm trying to get up for up and running. Okay. And I am in Stanford. I am set up. I was wondering what the totally blank. I've never logged in. Just like that. Just like that. It's just me. Andy helped me with getting in the system initially. Over here, welcome password, got back and forth, so then I can I mean, it's not a big deal. I'm just taking notes right now, but I know I'm eventually going to have to get it. Yep. I forget what his name is, but he came from Versailles today, and he said he brought his computer up with him. His new controller, so it's easier for a few days. Oh, Dan? What's that? Dan? I think it's Dan. I don't know if that makes a difference if you set it up or. And it should be this. Yep, of course. And it should be this. So, belongings and EFG Berea does not. I wish they did. They don't. I believe Chandler does some drawings attached to it, which is statement and attachment in Epicor, which is nothing more than a link to where the drawing is at. But yeah, it depends where you're at and what number you're looking. A lot of the stuff that EFG Berea, which is a rather large irritation of mine, is that you can look up part number at EFG Berea, but the part number isn't necessarily the drawing number. Like some of stock and common items, like let's say it's a grade 5 quarter ton nut. There's a drawing file that's grade, it would be like grade 5 STD standard. And that's what the drawing would be named, so you're kind of left searching and looking to figure out where that's at. Yeah. Which a lot of the special nuts that we make, they are filed under their reference number, which is just the 4-digit number. Like this one would be 7507. Because it's a special bushing, it's probably saved the 7507 on the system. But that's because it's a big order like that. So I mean, I have a kind of a little irritation with the way things are filed and saved there when it comes to the drawings and engineering, but that's, of course, that's the way it was before I got there, so I'm just trying to get used to it.
Because it would help, you know, between the two assemblies, just trying to understand the problem before we even got into it, you know, if you had a picture of it, you know.
Oh, I agree, but that's one of those things that, you know, it's growing pains, I guess you could say, you know, as the companies emerge and everything else. There's certain things, you know, I'd like to see done differently, especially when it comes to the drawing side. I believe Chandler, I'm not sure about quality, but I think Chandler does attach their drawings in their Epicor. I'm not sure if quality does. I can't remember if they do or if they don't, but I'd like to see more of our drawings attached to the system. That way, you know, even if somebody comes in and says, leaves a note in Epicor that says, okay, customer sent the drawing, this is the new revision of it, you'd be able to look at the drawing that's saved on the system. If it's not the same revision as the note that's left in Epicor, you can be like, hey, it throws up a red flag that says, hey, we need to make sure that we have the right revision now. Where you can't do that right now. Everybody just goes under the assumption, okay, the drawing that we have on the system is the most current drawing, when it quite possibly couldn't be.
I've seen that before. We've had to match drawings and labs just to make sure it matched with what the method was on. Otherwise, you would stop making part. You know, it wouldn't even make.
Yeah. So there's other things. No matter where you go, there's always going to be growing pains and new people come in and out. People want to see things done differently. So, yeah, that's pretty good.
What happened?
Okay. That's me.
I would recommend that you put the letter at the beginning. It's a little easier to find the job. You can do a search for jobs starting with us rather than starting at 081. Okay, and this will be the one where it's here, where it's a sub-assembly? Okay.
Yeah, we'll do this one as a sub-assembly, and I'll create the next one I create. I'll have an M at the beginning of it, so it'll be okay for you.
Okay. You know what I'm lucky?
I don't think we need to.
Time based.
Yep. Okay, let's do top level, yeah. And use whatever or required date you think would be appropriate.
We'll just use it first. Okay. Past the end of the month.
Right.
We'll be
add your demand line. Again, you don't have to save between every step. It can be fast enough. I like to get in the habit of that in case I get interrupted.
I happen to save all the time. I'm not a planner.
You want to go to actions and get the details. Yeah, this time you want to pull the sub-assembly alternate. Yep.
Take your time.
What's the little checkbox on the bottom?
I didn't see that.
Use subassembly for all. Use alternate for all subassemblies.
Yeah, I basically ignore that. I'm not really sure what it does. Okay, so now looking at the job, a couple things you notice. One is that all of the components of that phantom are now showing as actual materials rather than as, you don't see that phantom number at all. You used to just say PF whatever. Pull all those guys in. And the 7507 is not listed as materials. It's up above as assembly number 2. See that? At the top there's the...
Oh, yeah, no, I see. I was staring at it. Sorry, I was waiting.
I asked you a question you didn't answer, so I apologize. All right. So, and then if you hit the plus sign under that assembly, you'll see its operation and its materials. Okay. See, before, all of that 7507 wasn't even there, and you're relying on somebody's memory to make sure that somebody did them.
Is that all the materials that it's saying?
Well, most of those are tools.
Performing this bushing, yes.
Now,
that's all the different tools.
Mark the job as engineered. I don't think we're going to actually produce this. We don't have to produce it. And go to Actions, Schedule, Job Scheduling. And the reason we're scheduling this is when we go to time phase, we want to see the date. If you don't schedule it, it'll be way, well, I think you will see, but it's going to be way down at the bottom with no date.
You just want to do it backward again.
Yeah, just do it backward from 5-1, and we'll find out if we have enough time.
Absolutely.
Nope. See where it says due to system setting? That means the system reverted to a forward schedule because I didn't have enough time to start this unless I went from the past. And you've got a company setting that says do not allow historical dates. I'm kind of 50-50 whether I allow historical dates or not, but we'll talk about that in the planning area. Okay, so now it says if I start it today, 4/16, it's not going to finish until the 15th of May. No. Okay. Now, if you go to Actions and Schedule, Job Scheduling Board, again, I like to use the board because I'm kind of a picture guy. I like to see the Gantt chart. Hit the Schedule tab and double-click on the job number. Okay. So you can see, well, interesting. Yeah, this is one with the subassembly. Okay, double-click on that 7507, and you see the operations for that. Okay, so what this system is saying is that doing a backward, or actually a forward schedule, I'm going to start with the header 375A, making the bolt part of the job. I'm going to send it outside for heat treat, and then it's going to be coming back, and I'm supposed to do operation 30, the hot roll, starting the 27th of April. I also need the 7507 at the same time because I had related operation to operation 30. So the system said, okay, well then I also have to have the bushings ready at the same time on the 27th. And fortunately, the outside operation for heat treat for the bushing was the same number of days as the heat treat for the bolt. So they ended up starting both the bolt and the bushing at the same time. If the bushing had a longer heat treat operation for some reason, it would have said that I have to start the bushings today, but I don't have to start the bolt for a couple days yet because if I started the bolt today, the bolt will be sitting around waiting for that bushing. So this is one of the advantages of having this as a subassembly is that the system is automatically scheduling those operations to be done at the same time so that they can both start that operation 30 at the same time. We will see when we do the other job where it's not a subassembly, you know, what the differences would be. I'd like to go to time phase on the 7507 now, and I'm not sure if you highlight 7507. That's on the tree view, not the part number. And then go to the Detail tab. And I think there you can find part 7. No, that's the wrong part.
Oh, no.
Off to the right. So
Oh,
find
there you
7 there. Yeah. Open with time phase.
Oh, that's pretty cool. That subassembly shows up there.
Yep. You look at the time phase here, it's got receipts and it's got required, but there's no requirement. Job number S8109 is not there. Because this is a subassembly, because this is a subassembly in this scenario, it's not going in and out of inventory, so it doesn't show up on the time phase. Okay. So the thing that's driving the demand for the material to make the bushing is going to reference the job number for the final bolt. Okay. And I don't remember off the top of my head what that material is. We could look at it if we want, but I don't know if that's necessary if everybody understands the concept here. If it's a pull-as assembly on a job, that part number doesn't show up on time phase. It's just like a phantom number doesn't show up in time phase. The demands have been blown through to the lower level parts.
And that is a subassembly. It's not going to show anything on
When
time
you
phase.
say, and
Because
again,
everything's driven by the actual part number,
right.
by the 80.
Because we say pull as assembly when we added the 7507 to the bill, a lot of people get confused of that pull as assembly code. It took me many, many months to get comfortable with it myself. It means take the bill of material and routing for that 7507 and pull it into the job for the top level item and pull it in as a subassembly. So it has the subassembly ID on the job. It says this is assembly number 2. Now, there's another thing here. On the job, you don't see an assembly 1, and that sounds kind of weird. I got assembly 0 at the top. Normally, your first subassembly is a 7. There isn't a 1 on this job because the Phantom was on the bill of material before the 7507. So the Phantom became assembly 1, but because it's a Phantom, you don't see it on the job. Kind of a weird thing. If we would have added that 7507 as material number 20 and had the Phantom as material number 30, then the 7507 would be assembly number 1 and you wouldn't see an assembly number 2. Doesn't really make a difference. That number is just a unique identifier. It's not necessarily the first one you have to do. It's just a little less confusing people. If they see an assembly 2, they assume there's an assembly 1 somewhere. And in this case, there isn't. Okay.
But it's all the same job number.
It's all the same job number, but different assembly. And when you create the job traveler, you have the option to do a page break at assembly level.
You can.
And then you have a standalone document that says, this is job number S008109, assembly 2.
Was
for part
the
number
last company,
7507.
we ran Avante, Epicor Avante. We built this into their, we built this the Phantom, so that it flowed back up through as a separate assembly. We built that into the actual job, which they didn't have.
Yeah.
Because they only wanted one work order. Now, I argued that if you have more work orders, you can adjust resources easier because you have more work orders. Now you're tied, right? I guess maybe not on Epicor 9, where if I need there's 2 headers. One's making the bolt, one's making the bushing. If I want to change and reschedule the bushing one somewhere else because I have something else that kicks in there, is it changing then? It's going to change that. How does it?
Yeah.
I know we're going to go into scheduling. I don't want to necessarily go there.
That's fine. Why don't you minimize the time phase? So we're going to look at it again a little bit. And go back to the schedule tab here. Okay, you're talking about the heading machine?
The 7507. Let's assume, we have 2 different schedules here.
Yep.
2 different resources that are being scheduled.
Yep.
The HD 375A and the NF 500D.
Right.
If on the floor I have another, like I'm scheduling that resource, that 500D, and I say, you know what, I can't really start that bushing because I've got 3 other jobs in front of it. and I push those jobs in front of it. When I come back and look at this, I would see that pushed way out, and would I see then that the hand roll can't really start until I'm done with my bushing?
Okay, yeah. Okay, so let's use this example. This is going to be fun. Click on the yellow bar for the NF500D operation under the 7507. And let's say that that can't run until the 17th. So just slide it off to the 17th. You see at the very top there's a little red triangle. You can barely see it. Yep. Okay, so if you drop it wherever you want to run it, the system says, okay, because I was dragging it to the right, it assumes you wanted to do a forward schedule of that starting at 12:56 p.m. on the 17th, because that's where it was when you dropped it. And if you opt to the right, it says move option. You've got operation only. Hit the drop down. You could choose to do the entire job, move everything based on this operation starting on the 17th.
So the whole tree.
Or I can do the branch, which would be from that point on. Or I could do the assembly, which would be just the 7507 assembly. Now, typically, I don't like to do the assembly because if I'm moving that assembly, I can't do the final assembly either because I need the parts before I can start.
So all subsequent.
So let's use branch subsequent operations. Because I'm moving it forward, I want to move everything after that, but I might not want to move everything before that. I might be willing to do the first operation a little
and let it sit.
and let it sit while then do the second. Okay, and this is always going to be a simulated schedule when you're on the scheduling board. So if you don't like the results, you can just wipe it out and start again. So go ahead and hit the OK button. Okay, now it's saying it's going to finish on the 29th instead of the 15th, which is interesting. And okay, okay, it did move everything. Yeah, let me figure out why did it move the top level assembly. See, I was expecting
Top level run.
I was expecting the first two operations of the main assembly to stay where they were. Okay, I think I know what happened. When it did the forward schedule for that operation, it treats it differently with forward and backward.
This way.
It did a forward schedule of the final assembly, and then when it got the new date for the end of the job, it then backwards scheduled to that upper level.
But see, that's wrong.
But it's still done wrong because it should have only changed out 30 then.
Yeah, exactly. It should only, exactly. The only one that should have kicked out would have been anything after. No, would that be the subsequent because it is underneath? It's a subassembly to HR, because it is attached to HR30.
Right.
Yeah, if you undo, can we undo that? And
Yeah,
try
so
it?
actions, undo changes.
Undo all changes.
It doesn't matter. When it says all changes, it means the changes on all jobs. And there's only one job here, so it really doesn't make any difference whether you do all or current job.
Okay, so now let's do that again, but do it on that and subsequent as opposed to, and see if that does it. We'll move your area. Assembly and
Yeah,
subsequent.
we did branch subsequent that time, so this time let's do assembly subsequent. Okay, so that's, see there, it only moved that assembly and it didn't
See, now,
move about
but see, I
30.
can't, I don't have, in this case, my, well, it isn't a washer. My bushing isn't available, so I shouldn't be able to go to 30. 30 is
Right.
kicked out.
Right.
This should be kicked out.
So you really should do, we should do branch, but unfortunately the branch, it didn't just go from about 30 on at the top. It moved everything. So undo the changes. this time, let's say, drag that.
Well, what's interesting is we're dragging NF500. I guess is the right.
Yeah, the scenario we're having is that I can't start the bushing in time. So let's drag that to the 17th again, and this time, just to see if there's a difference, do job all operations. Yeah, it's going to
keep everything in line, wouldn't it?
Yeah, it's just like the first one. Okay. Undo changes.
But when it still looks like that it doesn't want to start the the heat treat until
Well, what it was doing
it
is
looks like the two heat treats have to go together for some reason.
it was on the last one, like the first one, it is making the bushings first, letting it go all the way through heat treat, and then once it's done heat treating the bushings, then it starts the forming of the bolts.
Right, and it should be starting the hot roll at that point. So let's try this. Highlight the HD375A, not the bar, but in the tree view. Okay, right-click and choose Lock Schedule. I'll see if it's going to lock the whole job or just that off. The whole job, darn it. So I was hoping I could lock those first two operations and then do a forward schedule, and then it would say, okay, 10 and 20 stay where they are, so I'll change 30, but that didn't work.
Well, it's kind of confusing because that subassembly is a feed into 30 on the top assembly, the final assembly. So you would think the system should know. Oh, Frank, what's up? You would think this, you know what I mean?
Yeah, the first time we scheduled it, it worked great. I mean,
oh no,
it looks
right.
Lineup.
That's what's right.
But
I want to move my
potentially, yeah, what we could potentially do here is say, okay, because the 7507 is going to start 2 days later, and you know that that means that I can start the hot roll on the 29th.
Wait a second. Let's move the 7507.
That's what we were moving.
No, we're moving the
We're moving the first operation of 7507.
Yeah, what if we move the actual?
Move the whole
assembly.
The sub-assembly
Yeah.
bar. Yeah, we could try it.
This bar?
Yep.
There. Yeah, try it somewhere out there.
And then your move option, is it going to be the assembly or is it going to be subsequent ops?
I think subsequent ops.
Branch subsequent operations.
No, I think you're in
Okay.
there.
No.
Dang it.
See, it moves.
Why is it moving? Because there's no dependence on that. There are two parallel operations going on at the same time.
Yeah, for some reason when I'm doing a forward schedule from the scheduling board, it's not recognizing the related operation and it's doing the whole upper level.
What if it was finite? Would it separate?
Finite, the only thing that they do is put between the operations. Because if the system said, okay, I want to do the hot roll operation on the 8th, but it's already 100% capacity on the 8th, it might move it out to the 13th. What I was going to suggest doing is take the hot roll operation and take the yellow bar and drag it to the 29th. And then do a forward schedule and do the move option of subsequent ops.
It isn't the same schedule.
Branch subsequent ops.
And we're getting into scheduling here. We need to.
Yeah, and hit your OK. Yeah, modified a little bit, but it left the hot roll work. It was so. Anyway, okay. I guess we just had to go into the scheduling enough to show which is the best way for engineering to set it up? The answer to that is, how do you want to schedule it? So it's kind of a chicken and egg, but the main thing here is that 7507, when it is scheduled, it's scheduled when you reschedule this job. And it's all interrelated, and it's all done within the scheduling part of the system. In the 7507, there's no inventory netting. There's nothing on time phase. I mean, when we looked at time phase, we saw we already had 3 jobs for 50,000 each.
But there'll be material requirements that feed.
Right. If I looked at the material for that, and if you highlighted the NF500D operation and go to details, down below, well, that doesn't show materials for some reason. Must be because they're not constrained. But we could go to job tracker if we wanted to find out what that material number is. We
Look
go
at
to time phase,
and it should show us.
You need some for job number F008109. Okay. Now, let's create the job for the other subassembly. Yeah. While we're still here, go to Actions, Undo Changes. Okay.
Maybe something like this, right?
Yeah. And then you can clear this, and then or just do new job either way. Okay. Call this whatever. M00819. Before you leave here, I think what that use alternate method for all assembly levels would be if the sub-assemblies also had an alternate. And you want
It
to
would
use
pop
that
up and ask me.
Well, I think that's right, but I don't know for sure.
Also, if you had a subassembly and an alternate, it would pop up and say, well, which one of these do you want to use?
Right. The alternate for the top is due to subassembly. There's 3 ways to make that subassembly.
Right.
You know, and yeah, if you're manually creating the job, you could adjust it that way. So, okay, so here's the manual job, and now you'll see that material 7507 is listed as material number 30 on this bill of material. It's not subassembly up above. Okay, and let's schedule this job. Schedule, job scheduling. And default to the backwards schedule from 5-1. True. Okay, now it's also showing it's going to be done on 5-15. Go to let's go to job scheduling board for this job. Schedule tab. Oh, why is it not showing?
We didn't engineer it, did we?
No, we
did engineer it.
schedule it. Okay. Okay. See, now it's scheduled the same dates because the actual critical path on this thing included the bolt itself, but you don't see any operations here for the 7507. Okay. So let's go to time phase on 7507, which I believe is minimized. All right. Off to the right, it's a different part number, but we can change it. Clear the screen. We can't because we opened it by right click. My bad.
Oh. Something turn off for that job, though. For the details. Yeah. Okay. We can do that.
And actually, we couldn't have on the other one because it's no longer assembly, so you're going to see.
Give it some material into the job, isn't it?
Before we didn't see the materials.
Oh, we don't.
Okay. See, now you see down below there's a requirement for 10,000 for job number 8109. And I don't have any minimum inventories for these things. And the system thinks I'm already going to have 100,000 in inventory, even if I cancel that job 27177. So the system's not going to create, in this case, any more jobs to make this because I've got some sitting in inventory. When it was the subassembly, it said we had to make them. So if I really do have 100,000 of these sitting in inventory,
I'm not going to make them.
then it's better doing it this way.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, because a subassembly would have had you just keep using it, and you would have never used those bushings. The only reason that that may be an advantage in my mind is if you want to keep some of these things in stock for service parts, and when you're using them for a new bolt assembly, you do want to make more, then the not netting inventory isn't an issue because you really do want to save that for when there's a standalone order for them. Or if I've got other places where I use it where I want to pull from stock. Yeah, like you made, and maybe this is a question for Deanna there, when she said you had to run them on the same machine, I think she meant they had to be at the same hand roll for the hand roll operation. Yeah. Actually, manufacturing these was a totally different machine. It was the MB500D, not the NF375.
They're two different machines.
Yeah.
To manufacture the bushing
Right.
and the bolt.
So if I didn't have any pre-existing jobs for this thing and I didn't have any inventory, MRP would have kicked out a job for 10,000. And the required date on that, see it says 4/27 as the due date.
Mm-hmm.
That's the scheduled date for Op 30. Because remember the
Right.
started on today for the 16th, and it said the bolt isn't going to be ready until 4/27, so that's when I need the bushings. Now, if I did that and created a job and I scheduled it to be done on 4/27, and then I reschedule that top-level bolt job, or I change the quantity, then if I'd already firmed this job for these bushings, then there would be a reschedule message on the planning workbench saying you have to change the date and or the quantity. And if nobody reacts to that message, they don't get it. But if it was a subassembly and I rescheduled the job and or the change in quantity, it's going to immediately show on the dispatch for making those bushings that the quantity is now 20,000 instead of 10. Or the date is now 4/28 instead of 4/16. So if you're doing a lot of rescheduling and you're not interested in netting inventory for the bushings, then the subassembly is probably the better way to go. But if I really want to build those bushings on standalone jobs with the optimal lot size and schedule them to be in inventory on the day before the hot roll so that I know on the dispatch on that schedule to pull it out. And again, it just keeps going down to scheduling. You know,
how do you want to do this?
Scheduling, if you're not running to the schedule, then you may still not have those bushings ready when it's time to do the hot roll. Or if the turnaround time, because both of these have subcontracts just before the hot roll,
Mm-hmm.
if they're different subcontractors, you might not get them back at the same time. Yeah, they both have a heat treat, but are they the same heat treat?
And that's what I was asking. I mean, just so that, how do you, I thought by assigning it to 30 on that subassembly that we created now a requirement that the bushing be available in 30 hits. So there's a sub-schedule of that subassembly based on when it's required for 30.
Right. Yeah, and we have that in either of these scenarios. It's just that in this scenario where it's the material, it's just due the same day. When it's a subassembly, it's due the same minute. Now, whether you're running to the minute is another question.
If we wanted this bushing to get done in planning wise, if we wanted it to get done like at the same time that the bolts are ready to go to hand roll, then this is set up the way we want it to.
The subassembly?
Correct. No, this is the material aspect. This is on
It's a part.
Yes. But if we wanted the bushing to get done, let's say, a day before, how would we have to have this set up in the system?
If you had put a receiving time on this of 1 day, Let's see.
So it'll get it done. It'll add that, make that part of it. If we look at time phase now, it's a day earlier. So you're saying?
Yeah, I can't show it on here without going to the actual scheduled date. The required date of the job is still 4/27, but the required date of the last operation is now going to show 4/26 because the system was scheduled the last operation to be done a day before the job is.
Are you talking about the subassembly one?
No, the last operation to make the bushing itself. Standalone job for the 7507.
Okay.
But if I look at time phase, it's still going to show a required date of 5/27.
Right, but if I look at my...
Let's try this. Go ahead and make sure you save this. I think you did.
Yeah, I think
Okay.
I'll do it again.
Go to job entry. Remember this time phase still shows that the job is due on 4/27. Just to be sure, hit refresh. Yep, still says 4/27. We'll create a job with a required date of 4/27, and then we'll look at the schedule. And I think that the last operation will be on the 26th.
So one of them?
Job entry?
So it's almost like you're building a little bit of queue time in here.
Well, you are. Because it's a different job, that when we create a standalone job and we link the last operation, it'll say this is due at, let's say the last hour of the day is 4 o'clock. Let's say it's due at 4 o'clock.
Mm-hmm.
The job was due at 7 in the morning. So I'm losing it. If I had it as a subassembly, it'll say that the bushing operation, or actually the last operation of the bushing is the heat treat. So it says the heat treat must be delivered by 10:30,
Right.
because the rolling operation is scheduled to start at 10:31. So it's much more precise. May or may not be accurate, but it's much more granular on the schedule.
Mm-hmm. Well, you can do coloring exactly.
Yeah.
On this one with the material, how we have it set up, it's still pulling it under as the same job number, correct?
Yeah, it's just a material issue to it, just like the steel.
Right. So if you look at the op 30, the hot roll, highlight that in the tree and go to details. Okay. It's scheduled for 3:05 a.m. start time. Okay. Because the 7507 is a material, MRP is only looking at date 4/27. So it's saying you have to have it done by the end of the day on 4/27.
Yeah, it doesn't look at the time.
Doesn't look at the time. On the MRP is the part level to the day. Job scheduling is at the operation level to the minute. So if it's brought in as a subassembly, then it's done by the job scheduling at the operation level.
MRP is job to day.
Part number to the day.
Job scheduling is operation to the minute.
Yep. And so some people say, well, I'm really not interested in scheduling to the minute because I don't know what minute it is. But here's an example where you're actually off by several hours.
You can't achieve that.
Not with the MRP. MRP is always due at the end of the day.
That's why I put the day in, so now it'll be a day ahead.
Right. And that's kind of I'd rather be safe than sorry. If I had a one-day receiving time,
Mm-hmm.
then when I look at the dispatch list for that last operation to make the 75, because it has to be inventoried by the end of the day on the 27th,
I'll have it.
and it has a one-day receiving time, I have to be done with the operation by the end of the day on the 26th.
Which guarantees that it'll be available.
So it's not really being done a day early. It's only 3 hours early, because its requirement is scheduled to start at 3 o'clock the next day. Having said all that, we've got a 7-day turnaround time on the subcontract. If they can really turn around in less than 7 days, it's going to be here anyway.
Does our shop calendar say that we're open then?
Probably. Well, I know it does because it wasn't scheduled. When you created your, were you here when we did the shop calendar?
No.
We did that yesterday. If you have an 8-hour shift and you check boxes 1 through 8, it's displayed as 12 a.m. to 1 a.m., 1 a.m. to 2 a.m., 2 a.m. to 3 a.m. And I recommended that you change it to be 7 through 4. instead of 1 through 8. Also, if your efficiency is such that you don't really get 8 hours of valuable time out of an 8-hour shift, you may want to set your calendars at only 6 or 7 hours so that you're underloaded because you're not going to be 100%.
Okay, so there's R4 scheduling.
Shop calendars are only for scheduling. They're not the same as the shift definition, which is used for payroll and labor reporting.
Okay. So shop calendars are scheduling only.
And customer supplier calendar too.
Yes, supplier shipping, or excuse me, the lead time on a purchase item uses the production calendar, but it doesn't look at how many hours of the day. It's just every day that has at least 1 hour checked.
Okay.
So it doesn't matter whether I check 1 through 8 or 7 through 12. It still considers that a working day. But if I've got 1 hour on Sunday night from 11 p.m. to midnight, because the early morning shift starts at 11 p.m. Sunday night, then on your purchase lead times, it considers Sunday as one of your days of the week. So,
Well, that is good to know because you shouldn't do that.
Yeah.
Not that we are.
what if you don't have a calendar associated with a supplier, it defaults to the company calendar. If the company calendar is 8 hours a day, 4 days a week, then you implement or enter your purchase lead times as 5 days per week. The supplier says I got a 3-week lead time, you enter this 15. If your default company calendar is 7 days a week, then you'd enter a 3-day week lead time as 21 days.
So both the ways that we set this part up right now, either as a sub-assembly or as a material item, both of them are going to show the same part number, the same job number when it comes to the 7505.
When it's a sub-assembly, you've got job number S8109, assembly 0 for the top level, and assembly 2 for the 7507.
Mm-hmm.
In the material scenario, you've got job M8109 for the top level and an entirely different job number for the 7507.
Because it's being pulled in as a material.
Right. It's pulled in as a material, and you might not have any job at all if you've already got enough material in inventory.
Okay. Because it's looking at the inventory when you're pulling in as material.
Right.
And when it's done in a sub-assembly, okay.
Right. MRP recommends a job based on the net inventory at that day of all your existing inventory plus all your demands. If it's a sub-assembly, it doesn't matter if there's other demands or other jobs. It manufactures that required quantity on the same job number as the top level, but it's a different assembly number within the job. And we might even want to run a print a job traveler for the one of the sub-assembly just so you can see how different that may work.
So the one that we attach it as a material, that's the one that we'd want to have it set up as a backflush so that it demands us to put a number in there to have it pulled out of inventory.
Yep. That's a good point. If it's a material, then eventually that material has to be issued to the job. It'll be done automatically if you set up the backflush. If it's not backflush, you have to do an issue material to job to get that material there. And when you do that, that's when the cost of that 7507
It's not associated with the job.
and that cost would go in at the average cost based on what was in inventory. If it's a sub-assembly, you don't have to do any issuing of material because it's on the job already. It's staying in WIP all the time.
Yeah.
But the material to make the bushing goes in as a material cost on the job. And then the labor and the burden and the subcontract for the bushing goes on the top level job. And it just moves along with it. And as soon as I finish that heat treat operation for the sub-assembly, it shows those parts are now available for hot roll. I don't have to do another transaction to show that they're now there. But again, you're not getting an average cost then, you're getting the actual cost that they spent for that, all the labor and burden and subcontract. So if that subcontract operation happen to be a higher price for whatever reason, then you're going to have the higher price on the job.
Mm-hmm.
If I had 50,000 of those things still in inventory and I received a PO with a higher one, then it's going to average it out a little bit. Again, I don't know if that's a significant difference. Heather's just laughing.
It depends on the numbers. Yeah, it really does.
Yeah, I'll have to talk with Deanne and see which way she wants to set it up. Chances are she's probably going to want to set it up at a material line so that she can see the differences in the cost and everything else.
Right.
Because if we do it the subassembly way, we don't get that separation. Like you said, it all rolls together.
Right.
Oh,
The good,
but you're being funny.
Yeah. I'm not sure if this is,
It all rolls together.
I'm not sure if this is totally good news or not, but if you change your mind and decide that you really don't want it to be a material, you want it to be a subassembly, the bad news is that you do have to go to modify that revision in the engineering workbench. The good news is all you have to do is uncheck full assembly. Okay, so you don't have to add a new part.
I'm leaning the other way, believe it or not.
Well,
I lean the assembly way.
that's a discussion I'm sure we can have. I don't know how she would want to see it. I mean, I'm sure whatever we recommend in doing is what she did.
There's a lot of a make-to-order mentality here, and the subassembly kind of fits along with that.
That's what
I agree with that.
So when you're making those bushings, you know exactly what job they're being made for because that job number is
It shows right on it.
I'm making it for that.
Right.
Is why.
Costing wise,
Well,
they want to capture that.
On the cost accounting side, there's a piece of me that wants to see that. I want to see the next level broken out cost. That's what I want to see, because I want to see what did that bushing cost me, and whereas I don't want to see, because that's related to that specific job and all that flows through. Otherwise, it's going to come in, and I don't know if it carries in when it comes in. I think you said it does. If that material comes back in, it's going to come in at the actual average material, labor, and overhead.
If it comes in
As a material, it's going to be issued to
if it comes in as a material, it'll be whatever the average was from inventory.
material, labor, and overhead.
Right.
In 3 buckets, it'll come through like that. Is that? And that's, I mean, I guess that's okay because it's probably only going to be made for that job. But I would. It does a couple things as an assembly. It reduces the number of transactions that I have to make. I'm just clocking on. I'm issuing my original material to the job to make the bushing, and then clocking on to that resource at that time, that activity, and then after that, it's just going to flow through at that point. So less transactions.
Yeah, just to throw another wrench in here. I've been assuming that when you're making these bushings, you've only got one job out there that's requiring the bushing to do these assemblies.
Is that true?
Yes.
Okay.
If you ever had the scenario where I had 3 lengths of bolts that I'll require this bushing, if it's a sub-assembly, the guy making the bushings
Doesn't know which. Well,
have to
he will.
report his production on 3 different jobs.
If it's a material,
Let's say I need 10,000 bolts that are 2 inches long, 10,000 an inch and a half, and 10,000 that are 4 inches long. And they'll require the same exact bushing.
3 different jobs.
The guy making the bushing is going to see 3 different jobs for 10,000 each.
Yeah.
So he has to do the start activity, end activity 6 times. If it was a material, MRP would say, I need a total of 30,000. So I'd have one job for 30,000, I'd do it.
Where's it get used? I don't care.
The difference between 2 transactions and 6 transactions, if I'm only doing them every 4 hours,
Yeah,
it's no big deal.
Yeah,
Because
it's only one bolt and one bushing. Right. The sub-assembly.
off the top of my head, I'd go there.
Yeah, but I mean, we don't make this bushing for any other bolt unless
I would definitely say that.
for as long as they've been making it,
Right.
they get a that says, hey, let's make it
Well,
in the play.
yeah, the struggle that Deanna will have is going into time phase to see the 7501. She won't see it. She won't see it. Well, but see, there's no. What happens?
Right.
What will happen is, hey, Jim, I put this assembly in there, and it's So it's on the job, but I don't see it in time phase.
Yeah.
Well, you won't because it's all WIP. There is no such thing as a part. But it's that leap is hard.
Yeah, logically, it's like I don't see time phase to tell me
I need to make this.
that I have to disseminate HD 375As.
Right.
But on time phase, I see I need so much material that I make the bushing out of. Well, why do I need it? Well, it's for job S8109, 10,000 units.
Yeah, but that's the finished good. How come I don't see where the bushing is?
But if that finished good has a description that says bolt with bushing,
But
that's why I'm buying it.
you understand what I'm saying?
Yeah.
I mean, I'm making it for a subassembly that is really a WIP bucket. The inventory is never showing up anywhere.
Right.
You know, it's always in, I always call it the big bucket of money that sits out on the floor. And as soon as you issue material to it, you might as well just throw them up. And then eventually on the other side of it comes out a part, and some of the money comes out of the big bucket, you know. But when everything's commingled out there, it's like as soon as you go, you can't really tell. You can see a job and you know how much is in there, but I can't see a part because there is no such thing as a part at that point.
Yeah. It's like, you know, one of the analogies I like to go back to is bicycles. You know, if you can pretend that the bushing is the hub assembly for a 20-inch bike, but it also goes on a 24 or 26. The guy doing the hub assemblies, he likes to see the part number for the 3-speed hub. He doesn't care whether it's going on a different size bike. He's just making the hub.
I would make the part.
But if it's a sub-assembly, he's going to say, I have to do the hub assembly operation for this part number, which is describing the color and the frame and how loud the bell is on the handlebars. Eventually, you see that it's a 3-speed. You know. So sometimes that's the deciding factor is the guy on the shop floor.
Yeah, as long as the person that is asking that question about, I don't see the requirement to make the bushing. Well, it's because it's embedded in the big job.
Now, today's world doesn't see the requirement for the 7507 until he gets an email or note from somebody that says you got to make some of these.
Yeah.
It's not the system at all today.
I know.
But the basic question, you know, is going to come down, do they want to see, well, they'll still see the part number 7507 on the shop floor. You just won't see it on time phase. And this may sound like
you'll see the sub-assembly
discriminatory content, but the people in the office will understand that easier than the guys on the floor.
Yeah, they'll see. Actually, they will see it on the scheduling board.
Right. And see, the guys on the floor aren't looking at time phase. They shouldn't be. They should be looking at the dispatch list, the production schedule.
Yes.
And if it says make this item, it should make no difference to them why I'm making that amount or why am I making it at all. It doesn't matter what the demand is. The job scheduler creates, affirmed, and released the job. They just have to know what to make, how to make it, what material they're supposed to use.
What does 030 stand for?
That's the 30th.
It's okay. You've got
So
job
sub-assembly.
number, assembly, operation.
The assembly
Okay.
0
Assembly 0 operation
is
30.
final.
Yeah.
Assembly.
Right. So if we're looking at the time phase for the material and we had the 7507 as a sub-assembly, then on the material, you would see the job number assembly 2/10 because it would be the assembly 2 of that job in operation 10 rather than 30. But on to the right, under the job column, you just see the overall job number, and that's where you right-click to open the job tracker.
Okay. You guys want to take a 10-minute break?
Yeah. One other thing that I showed yesterday that was commented on one of the emails that they really liked, that
You added something
is
into
the labels on the job tracker. Are you aware of that? You want me to show you that?
the labels on the job tracker.
Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah, see, well, we can do it on job entry as well. Just hit on the plus sign on the operations. Okay, out of the box it shows the operation sequence number and the operation.
Mm-hmm.
You right-click at the top of the tree view and say tree options. And then the line you can highlight instead of job header, make that operations.
Over the top, up here.
there's obvious things you can change, but for my example here, you want to click, look at the screen, there you go. Choose operation. And then these are all the things that you can display on that row. And what I used was actual production hours. And then in here you click and you hit space a couple times to give you a gap. And we put actual hours or something like that. And then a colon and another space, and then hit the OK on the bottom. And then it shows how many hours have been issued.
Oh, that is sweet.
On materials, you can say actually issued quantity. Because
Whoa,
if you
can I show receipts? Receipts?
I'm not sure about receipts, but you might be able to.
Quantity complete?
That would be on the job. So you go 3 options.
You can close
Job header, these are all the things you can put
Job detail?
on the top line.
Well, you can't go to job detail on that? Operation, I guess. It would be operation complete. The operation and then quantity complete?
Yeah, you can do that. You got rework hours, you got a whole bunch of user fields.
No, what's, no, oh my gosh. You know how
Probably
long
under Q, I would think.
quantity? Yeah. Hit quantity complete there. And, yeah, and then do, so it says QT. CO. Oh my gosh, that is awesome. What that does is you can quickly go in there and see how much I've gotten complete on each one of these operations.
And the beauty is that you can do this on the job entry or job tracker. In the standard system, you can't see any actuals on entry. You have to go to a totally different screen. If I go to job tracker and I'm interested in how many hours I report, I have to go to operation, labor, transaction.
Can we go and see? Let's go and look. Can we find the current job and show that? Because let's find the current job that's got some operations complete.
Yeah,
here, I'll give you
it's right there. You don't have to change it. Just go job.
We only had the.
And you've got status complete. And just grab any one. If it's complete, I'm assuming I've got plenty of details on it. Interesting. Now, if it's hidden, you can hover with your cursor and it'll lighten up.
That's what I'm looking at. See the 8900? The great thing about this, I can go in on a job. I can quickly see, even if you scroll this out once, move that over there, Jonathan. Look, I can look and see what did I complete by operation.
Yeah, I completed
How many
more
hours
than
I spent, oh my God, that's like the world. That's like, that is candy right there.
Now, on materials, you get a green check when it's complete, and sometimes because of a rounding area, I needed 198.2.
You need to add that as the default.
I'll just say layout.
Yeah, this
we
is
make
my,
that a common layout for everybody?
I think you can, but you have to go into the screen customization rather than personalization. And I don't know if you exactly where to do that, but I think it's just like any other change to a
oh my God. You see the visibility you get just by, boom, popping that in there?
And again, because it's user personalization, you know, some people may not be interested in labor at all, but they're interested in the materials. Anyhow, people normally like that, so I like to show it. It makes me feel good when people smile and say, that was worth it right there. Well, I can back up and go. But again, the thing that I like about it is it lets me see actuals on the job entry. I don't have to go to tracker at all. If I was already in tracker, yeah, I got a couple more clicks to go to job details and look at the transactions and summarize at the bottom. But here it's right there.
Right there. Well, this becomes almost a display screen, you know, a query screen as to where am I on this job.
Right. Now, having said that, this job that we happen to grab at random, the job is complete. It was for 8,600. I made over 92,000 on one operation and only 50 on another. I had operations that were never totally complete. I never totally completed that subcontract. You know, what's up with that? Are there still open POs out there? There was all that taken care of, and we just decided that we're going to close this job and not worry about completing the operations. Yeah, I guess that's a topic for a job management workshop. But but this does show that logically I would say I can't complete more in operation 20 than op 10. So there was an error in my reporting somewhere because I completed more at 20 than 10. Maybe it's just the counting, I don't know if those parts are weight counted and it's within tolerance, but
It's their weight
They're
count.
weight counted.
And there's one thing we do know. It's wrong.
through.
True that. As the young people today would say.
Do that. Okay. All right, somebody said we wanted a break, and then I went and brought up that 10-minute topic. So, and then we're going to break for lunch at 11:30, so you guys can go to your meeting? Is that the deal?
I know we have the OCL today. I wasn't sure.
We have OCLs at noon, and you said you're not going to it, but I think I probably should go over just to,
Over to breakfast.
yeah. So I'm going to step out. I have a call at 11 I have to take. So if you guys want to, I talked to you guys. It's 10:45 now. Keep going, or you want to take 10 minutes and just?
I can keep going.
Well, I'd like to use the restroom.
That's what I thought. At some point you had coffee, and usually the coffee is a diuretic. So why don't we take 10 minutes, guys? We'll take a little bit of time here to answer emails, and that's pretty cool. So we can do that on, is that available on a lot of those screens, or is it just?
The only place I've actually used it to any extent is Job Entry, Job Tracker. A lot of screens you can't because of the way the tree view is. This is basically exploding a method, so I think you can do it on a quote because that's an exploded method, but you don't really have actual stuff on a quote.
No.
But there may be other things you want to show, such as what's the standard labor rate for this resource group. I think that's one of the fields. So you just try it. If you get right-click tree options, then you can do it. If you don't get tree options, you can't.
But you know my famous phrase is right-click, only good things happen. So
Try,
it's true. When you right-click, only good things happen.
I'm not Method Tracker. I'm in Method Tracker. Yeah. Okay. See, I don't have tree options. I can just collapse it or expand. So I can't change the stuff
You
there.
can do cost.
Well, yes, that's a good point. I had assumed that was well known as well. Because you can do this in the engineering workbench. So at the bottom, after you've engineered stuff, you look at the cost and say, well, wait a minute, that doesn't look right. Something must be off somewhere.
So the cost accountants out there. Heather?
Yes.
Let's see. Yes. Wait, I'm going to close that first. Oh, this is driving me nuts. This mouse is really good way.
I think it's on your joint side.
That's if I go to a list view, and click in here, then I get this collection, and I can hit that drop down, and then anything with a checkbox in the hidden, I can uncheck it, and then that information shows up as a row on
Right, or a column,
on
right.
the list. But I don't know how to change things on the tree side. When I joined Epicor, we had a 10-day boot camp in California where they just ripped off the top of our heads and dumped everything in. And we went over some of this stuff there, and I promptly forgot it. And it was only about a year ago I was at a client, and they had a tree view on Job Tracker with all that stuff showing. How'd you do that? And then they showed me the tree option. Yeah, I remember that from 100 years ago.
That was pretty cool. Okay.
So I think a workshop on YouTube hour to go over these resource groups and operations that you can do that.
Why?
There's about 10 finance resources you have. I want to make sure I want to bring in finance.
I don't know if we should or if we shouldn't because I didn't.
They're using finite scheduling, so even if you bring them in as finite, we're not running.
But I also didn't set these resources
If
up.
they're finite, they're going to be fixed with finite.
I also I didn't originally set them up, so I don't know if they need to be that way or not. I don't know if that's a discussion that we need to include somebody in planning and scheduling.
Jake, we are in the process of trying to figure this out, whether it's I think it's a resource. Remember I was talking to you about our scheduling issues, where we're trying to schedule based on setup reduction. That's really setup reduction without missing the. So that application enhancement is definitely well worth the investment if we can figure out what we need to do. Trying to figure out where we put the characteristics of the changeover. Well, I think it ends up being part of the operation because the operation relates to the resource.
Mm-hmm.
So if a resource, that resource has, in essence, these characteristics that you can use to schedule. So I'm thinking we take the resource and we add a user screen to that, which dictates scheduling prioritization so that we can put scheduling resource characteristics or resource scheduling characteristics next to them so that whenever engineering is adding that operation, they have to pick what is this operation, what's the draw, what's the head type, what's if it's got those characteristics. So I think the resource ends up, well, that's at the part level.
Okay.
But I think it's at the operation resource. The resource dictates the type of scheduling that the scheduling characteristics that we would want to use in order to schedule something for that resource. If I'm doing wire bending, like I would be at Northern Wire, my prioritization is completely different than what I would do in Euclid because the resource in Euclid has heading and wire draw and that characteristic. So I think the characteristics are related to the resource, but then whenever we schedule an operation for that resource, at that point we need to identify the type of characteristics that operation has so that when we're doing our scheduling we can reference when we're doing the scheduling we can say I want to go and use this wire draw in this length and this head type, and it will look at all the operations that are coming against that have that and sort them.
Right.
So that without, now there's the trick, without causing too much of a conflict on the schedule.
Yeah. I'm pretty aware of that concept, and a software I worked with before Epicor did that. So the good news is I spent hours doing all this stuff together. The bad news is that was a totally different scheduling algorithm than what Epicor uses. And without actually getting into the source of how Epicor runs.
Well, I'm not, okay, here's the deal. I'm not looking to change the algorithm underneath. On that resource scheduling screen that pops up where I am prioritizing on the finite scheduling, that screen where I put the 10 of those things, I want to add a screen on top of that that says, okay, I want to create my prioritizations. And how I want to create my prioritization is based on the resource constraints or the resource characteristics that I have in my job.
Yep.
And then it creates what I'm going to then drop back in. So I don't want to mess with the underlying schedule. I don't want to do that because that's a quagmire. I want to stay out of that. But I just want to add a level above. And that's
the planner to do the time tuning on.
Yeah. Instead of them sucking it out into Excel,
yep.
I want to provide them with that scheduling there. But I think it will affect what we're doing here on an engineering side because the resource has, and Jonathan and everybody knows that, the resource has certain capabilities that it can, when you're doing a setup,
mm-hmm.
you know, you've got tooling and all that stuff to do. So I think we probably go into the resource and identify those characteristics there. Then whenever the operation is being applied or being set up, it references the resource you're using and pulls in, okay, you're doing that job. Tell me a little bit about the job so that you're setting the scheduler up.
Yep. Well, let me just take a few minutes to talk about the approach that this other software works.
Okay.
And I'll see if I can make as much Epicor terminology as I can. On the resource, you would identify what attributes make a difference on the setup.
Yes.
Okay. So let's just say I'm looking at a simple shear. Okay. And I've only got two attributes: the width of the part and the thickness of the material. Because the thicker the material, the more pressure I apply, whatever. But the width is the main thing. Okay. Also at the resource level, I identify how much time is required to set up when I change the value of the attribute.
Good point.
So the width to go from 4 feet to 3 feet is 10 minutes. To go from 4 feet to 5 feet, maybe 8 minutes. The assumption is that if I have two jobs with the same width, I don't have to do any adjustment at all, so there's no time required. But when I go from then on the thickness attribute, it's 2 minutes when I change the thickness regardless of what the change is. So all that is defined in some kind of a table on the resource. Then on the part operation, you identify what is the value for this particular part that I'm making. When I'm doing that operation for this particular part, it's half-inch material and it's 3 feet wide.
That's all I need.
Okay. The third option, and this is where Epicor really falls down, is I have to know what the preceding job was to know how much, whether or not I have to apply time for this job. And I don't know what sequence the jobs are going to be until I actually have them scheduled. And then B, I have to schedule them again in a different scenario to see if my setup time changed. And this other software that I used, it actually could very quickly do various simulations and say the least amount of setup is to run the jobs in this sequence. Now, having said that, on the Epicor side, if we can show the attribute values on each of the jobs, and we show them on the job scheduling board,
each of the operations.
Yeah, on each of that operation, right? And I know either through another tab display, you know, what the values are. It's a standard part of Epicor that when I grab one job and move it on the resource scheduling board and I reschedule it to the new time, there's a little box on the bottom that says setup complete. And if I check that, then it won't schedule any more setup for that job. If I don't check that, it assumes that it's going to schedule the setup time for every single job regardless of what other jobs are running. So if I have 4 exact jobs and the setup time is 1 hour, it's scheduling 4 hours of setup. If I manually decide that jobs 2 through 5 should be run right after that, and then they won't get a sequence, or if they're already in the right sequence, I go to schedule.
Well, it's almost like a dynamic scheduling. It's almost like a dynamic. Now, I think by providing that overlay on top of that finite scheduling board where you're going in, that we won't be able to achieve all of that, but we'll get closer to where what I would call, and I said this to Sasha, but I think it's the right term, schedule based on margin utilization or margin increasing. So, you know, we cost that job out with a full setup.
Yep.
And then, any reduction in setup is where we tend to realize gain.
Right.
So if we can schedule and use an algorithm based on margin, getting the most margin, reducing the setup, perfect.
Yep.
And then we can just drop that back in to our resource scheduling board and back out.
If you had the time to do it all manually in the standard system and you knew the values to plug in, you can manually put the jobs in the sequence you want, and you can either check the box that says there's no setup at all, or you can right-click in the job entry and say, well, this time the setup is only 10 minutes instead of an hour. And then reschedule all the jobs, and it'll say, okay, guess what? Instead of having 28 hours required today, you managed to get it down to 18. I eliminated 10 hours of setup on that day by arranging things in the right sequence.
See,
the
that's
trick is to get a way to automate that. If you don't have the time for someone to do all that fine-tuning.
Yeah. Well, and we right now, we can't get them scheduled in the right order. Forget about realizing the setup gains. I think we do, when we do this enhancement, we do it in 2 phases. The first phase is to get them in the right order to realize the largest amount of margin.
Yep.
The second phase is to reduce and take advantage of that margin and reduce our lead times to the customers. That's the second phase. And so, but I'm willing to take the margin first. So, but I think, now with that being said, is that something that ATS is able to assist and help with? Or, and, I'll put you on the spot. Let me ask you this, and you can speak off the record. I'll turn the recorder off. Is ATS the best place to get something like this done?
I do have a biased opinion.
I know you do. Well, it might not be ATS.
I would. Yeah.
Is there a good, really good applications guy that we can turn to and say, okay, look, I can bring you in the conversation and have all of this together and say, this is what we're trying to achieve, and we can kind of make sure that we're covering all the bases. We've got it in the resource. We've got it in the operation. Jonathan and everybody's involved in this, and the scheduling people are involved, and we get the right solution put in place.
Yep.
Do we have a good program?
Yeah, I think so. Well, at least as long as we're going under the scope of we're leaving the scheduling engine alone. We're talking at user-defined tables, getting displays, adding screens and visibility to let people make better decisions, but still leaving it up to a person to do it. Because when you do something like a BPM, where you say if the value here is a certain thing, change something else, the more complex they get, the more it slows it down, and this is going to be very complex.
Well, and this isn't going to be a BPM. I don't want it to be a BPM. Basically, I want to take a spreadsheet and take the spreadsheet we're using today and make an app on top of the finite scheduling board for that resource, and let me go in and based on the characteristics of the operation, I want the system to go and reprioritize everything. And when you're done, you're satisfied with it. I want to take those priorities and drop them back into the finite board, and then firm it up. I'm not looking to solve the problem here. I'm wondering whether or not we have right.
We'd have to really discuss the whole thing. I will say that I did work on a project or an idea a few years ago of using an updatable dashboard to change dates, and we basically couldn't do it at the time. And the reason was with Epicor, you can't change the start date and the end date of an operation. They have to be system calculated.
I'm not looking to do that.
But even if you did another side application that would say these are the ones you really shouldn't run it, you can't display that in Epicor without going through every single operation manually adjusting it.
No, I didn't.
Yeah. But we could come through and say, okay, this is the optimal way to do it. And then you could arrange the operations on the scheduling board in that sequence. And Epicor may add up all its expected load and say you're 28 hours, but you have to know because this other application is going to be 25. But to get those two systems to both agree the same amount,
well, I'm just looking to get them in the right order.
Yep.
I'm looking to reduce all of a sudden the jobs are getting done much faster because there's less setup, and I'm okay with that.
Right. Right, because if this proves that using the, let's just call it the optimized sequence,
Yep.
that you're gaining 15% over the plan, then you just say, okay, I'm not concerned about my capacity until I'm 115%. Because I know that I've proven that my little trick is going to gain me 15%. Now, sometimes you're not going to gain quite that much.
Well,
Sometimes a little less.
you can overschedule your jobs because you know you're gonna realize efficiency through the optimization routine that's been written.
Yeah, I mean, at any point in time, a tool can be used up quicker than expected, and you've got to set up issues changing tools.
And to be honest with you, if we can get this, if I could get this to work, if we, as a company, could get this to work, margin would go up because we would realize way more efficiencies on some of this stuff. Not everybody, but a lot of people. Okay. Enough about that.
So you got a caller one?
Thank you. You
You did.
supposed to come. They're coming. I'll get out of here so you guys can do your stuff. What's the next thing?
I have another item that I would like to look into, and that's if there's a way that Epicor has the ability to either throw some sort of a flag or throw some sort of a warning about locks. Because what we have is we have some bolts and nuts that go through the system, and when they go through the system, they have to have certain head markings on them, and that gets changed based off of when they're manufactured. So if it gets manufactured in the month, let's say in the month of December, it'll have December, the year, and it'll have certain head markings that are on it. I know one of our plants, I believe it's Chandler, they use just subsequent numbers and they just go in line with each other, and that's how they do their head markings. But at EFG Berea, what it is we use a head marking that is designated by a certain set of letters. So you have letter A that means, let's say it's 2015, you know, the letter B, which is, or letter, I don't know, E, which would be, I'm just throwing a month out there, July. And then you'd have another letter, but all those letters mean a particular thing. Well, if the head punch, if the finish hammer insert does not match the month in which it was made, then the lot is pretty much rejected. Well, for the bill of materials, we want to figure out a way that whenever they decide to go back to run that same part number again, that part number throws out some sort of a flag or warning that says, hey, send this to engineering, or say, hey, this needs to get looked at because the finish hammer insert needs to get ordered no matter what. Because a lot of times the finish hammer inserts that we use, they'll use them for, let's say, 200,000 pieces. They can still continue to be used until that finish hammer insert pretty much gets destroyed or wears out. You understand what I'm saying?
I think so, but not sure the actual question here. You're looking for a expiration date on a purchase item?
Not,
I guess I thought you were going into more of a lot tracking / FIFO inventory, and then all of a sudden it's more of whether I need to buy a new tool.
Okay, so I guess the best way I can describe it is we have, let's say we have a customer, let's just say the customer is going to be military. We'll just call it military, is what it is. And it orders this part number right here. And when this part is ordered, it has to have a tracking number of ABC because it's being made in March.
Okay, and is that tracking number a lot number in Epicor?
Well, that's what I mean. This tracking number right here, we have it on our print. This lot number, we have it on the print, but it's not held or kept anywhere in Epicor. It's only tracked by the job number, and the job numbers are associated just with, I guess you could say, handwriting on a sheet of paper in a file at our facility that says, okay, this job number 0029001 has this lot number associated with it. So it was made in March, That's what this ABC stands for. Now, if the military comes back and orders another one, let's say that job number is going to be 0029055, it's going to get a new lot number because it's going to be made in September. Well, unless we have something in our system, since this part's already been created, this was the first time we made it, since it's already been created, it already has a bill of material on it, already has a bill of operations, all of that already exists on the system. But unless somebody knows that the part number, let's say the part number is 5566, this part number, since it was originally set up and we've already attached a finish hammer insert to it, it doesn't kick anything out that says, hey, you need to order a new finish hammer insert because it's being made in a different month. It'll just be made, and then somebody will come back and say, hey, this needs a different lot number on it. Now, at this point, we've already hammered out, let's say 50,000 parts, and they now all have to go to scrap because they have the wrong lot. They have the wrong lot number on them here at the top. I want to know if there's a way that Epicor will say, hey, this part 5566 is lot number controlled, and you need to order a new finish hammer insert so that it doesn't automatically go through the system.
Yeah, I see two issues here with different solutions. The first issue about the lot number, yes, you can make that part of the lot controlled. And when you create the job, first of all, is that ABC or whatever that lot code is it based on the planned month, or do you have to wait until you actually produce it to know what lot number it's going to be?
We actually have to know when we're going to produce it to create this lot number of part. So we already.
So in other words, if you had a job that was scheduled to in September, and you assign it the lot number code that you need for September, and for some reason you started early, so it was actually started in August, or you started late and it was actually made in October, is it okay to still have that September code?
No.
Because if it's not, then you won't know whether you need the September head stamp until you're within a few days of actually making that job.
Yeah, and
if you started in September and end it in October, do I need 2 days?
And that's another issue that we have to look at our facility. That somehow we need to figure out a way that we can bring this to life so that we're able to track it within Epicor, whatever numbers we assign to it, and say, hey, because I told the guys, I put neon pink sheets into their travelers and say, this part has to run with this number in this month. If it doesn't, the job gets pushed until we can get another finish hammer.
Okay. When you call a part lot tracked and create a job for that part, you don't have to assign it a lot number until you receive it into inventory from that job. And a lot of people will create that lot number right at that point. And especially if they don't have anything really physical other than a label that they need to identify the lot, that's not a problem. Some companies have metal plates with the lot number embossed on it, and they need a few days to get those lot numbers created, and they want those to be ready by the time they do the receipt. There's a transaction where you can associate a lot number to a job. And then when you go to receive the parts in the inventory, it says, oh, this job is making 2 different lots. Which one do you want to use for this receipt? And if I've got a metal lot number plate that has a barcode on it, then I can just scan that barcode to create that lot. You could do similar here. If you knew that that job is going to be manufactured in September, you could assign it the lot number at that point, and you could order that head stamp that has those codes on it. But as far as the material planning, remember that there isn't a revision or a lot on the bill of material. So I've got a part number for that head stamp, If I use the same part number for every single combination, then I could call that head stamp lot controlled to give it a lot number to match with that code, but the system isn't telling you I have to buy another one with a different lot number. Right now, I can't think of a way that the system can tell you that I have to purchase more, because I've still got one in inventory and it's still got some usage left, but I just ran out of time and I can no longer use it because it's got the August date and I now need September. The other way around that would be to create a unique part number for every single head stamp, and then every month you create a new revision of the parent item saying that now I'm using a different number head stamp. That sounds like a bad idea.
Terrible idea.
How quick of a turnaround do you have to get a new head stamp with the new code?
Well, if it's already been made once, they already have the dimensions and the pieces. It just goes to a company. It goes to a company and they just do the engraving on it, and that can take 1 or 2 days at most. So it doesn't take 2 or 3 weeks to get it made. It'll only take a day or two. Is it possible? What could we do is, instead of having the Phantom bill of material that has that finish hammer insert on it, could we have the Phantom and then have just the finish hammer come in as its own separate material that we use as a required item? That, let's say we just set up a, I don't want to say a generic because they're all different depending on one part to the next.
Oh, if you had, we're into the old make to order scenario. If you called that purchase item non-stock, then the system would give you a purchase order demand for a purchase order suggestion for every job that requires it. And then when you got your PO suggestions, based on the due date of that PO, you'd know the date code you needed. So when I looked at the purchase suggestions for that head stamp, it would say, I need one in September and I need one in November. Then you know that those are the 2 head stamp versions you need for those 2 POs. And so long as I don't reschedule that job and I don't actually have a supplier create that thing until a couple days before. And that's why I was asking about that lead time. If I have to predict 6 weeks in advance what date I'm going to be making those final bolts, that's going to be really tough. But if I can live with a week, you got a pretty good idea by the last week of August whether you're going to make this thing in September. The quantity may be off a little bit, but I know I'm going to make some. And now if the life expectancy on that tool is too short, you've got a time phase that says the total quantity of parts you have, they're going to be using that stamp, and you can decide whether I should buy 1 stamp or 4.
Okay, so then we would want to put it on there as its own item then, so that a PO suggestion does get generated. That way, that looks like that's the only way it's going to throw something out there for us to take a look at it.
Right, and that PO suggestion, because it was a non-stock part, it would be tied to a specific job. So when you receive it and it's got stamp code ABC, you say, this is for that job for that bolt that's running on such and such a date. Now, would you need, if you had different length bolts, would they potentially use the same exact stamp to stamp the heads? Or is it a different stamp for every part number?
For the length, I believe it's the same stamp. It's when you change the nominal dimension on it. So if it goes from a 1/2 inch, if it goes from a 1/2 13 to a 3/8 16, then you have a change in the lot number because that's specified within that number. You'll have the nominal dimension of it, the year it's made, the month that it was made in. I believe those are the 3 items that we have on ours. Now, how it's associated through Chandler I know they put 3 numbers on it, but those are all tied to a description somewhere in some sort of a chart, I believe. But of course, again, we're coming to the one company. It's eventually going to have to become streamlined across all the plants. But, you know, if it is lot control for some sort of a military sort of item, it should all be designated the same way. And in my belief, now, of course, I'm sure that will come up in the meeting at a later point in time, but I guess that's the way I'm looking at it right now when it comes to either bolts, screws, or nuts. How can we do that where everybody's pretty much following the same sort of a path?
You don't have that understood enough to have interchangeable letters, do you?
At this point in time, no, especially with some of the smaller parts, it's real hard to get something. I mean, if we were doing large, like a company that I used to work for, their progressive dies that they had, they were large sheets of metal, but they did have, like you said, they had interchangeable letters where they could just pop them in and out as needed.
That's what we did. Stuff.
Yeah.
The product is huge.
Yeah, but because these, I mean, how much room do you really have on the head of a .20 bolt? Not much. So the finish hammers go out to an engraving company, they engrave it, and they come back in. They're a solid finish hammer.
Yeah.
So there is no room for changing it. Once it's made up, it's made up. There's only so many times we can grind off the engraving that's on it and re-engrave it, because of course the more you grind it off, the shorter and shorter the punch gets. It's going to get to a point where you can't put it in a holder anymore.
There are a couple other options. I know the company that I worked on was low volume, but we also had an engraver, but now they have what's called a pellet machine that will laser engrave parts production, so that production speed. So you can make a parts without any marking, and then send them down the track, and the laser will burn. Unless,
I've seen something like that.
unless, of course, the customer requires raised or indented letters, then you're basically.
And these ones are required. And these military parts, from what I understand, they're requiring the raised lettering or some sort of lettering. I mean, I have seen one where they required, the only lettering they required was like a stamp or a paint.
Yeah.
I mean, that was something completely different. I mean, I don't want to say it's an easy fix, but that one was a lot easier to work with than doing something like this where you actually have to have the raised or indented letters. So. I'm figuring the avenue we're going to have to take is having some sort of PO suggestion generated all the time, anytime you run those particular part numbers for military. We'll just have to go in and manually order them every time.
Right. And if that PO description said, you know, you must stamp it with these codes plus current month or something like that, you wouldn't have to change those descriptions on every PO. They just know, okay, this thing is due in October, so I'm going to give it the October date code.
Yeah, I'm trying to figure out a way, because the issues that we're running into is that we can go in and we can put notes, we can put descriptions, we can put lettering inside the description. But if I'm the person that's been doing that job for, let's say, 5 years, I leave the company and somebody new comes in, they have no idea what these descriptions mean.
Yep.
It gets pushed off to the side, things get ordered, doesn't work out. Kind of the issue that we ran into now. I'm trying to figure out a way with Epicor when setting up the bill or setting up the part, it kicks something out that says, hey, this needs to get looked at. It always happens anytime a job is put in against a particular part number. And I mean, as of right now, it looks like this PO generation happens to be the only way it seems to work out.
Well, if all you need is a flag that says somebody needs to look at it and they can figure out what has to be ordered, you could use a user-defined field, and you could write a query that says, you know, show me all the demands for parts with these codes sorted by date. And you wouldn't even necessarily use a user-defined field if you could give it a different part class or group or something like that. Or these items are purchased, right? Well, you know,
The finish hammers, they are purchased, but anytime that they are purchased, the drawing has to be resent to the engraver, and they have to know what letters put on the actual hammer insert itself.
right. Where I was thinking is that those part numbers that require that special activity, you could theoretically give them a different buyer code. And then whenever a PO suggestion comes up for those parts, it would be on a whole different buyer code, and then that person says, hey, these are the items that I have to, you know, go in and identify what stamp code they use. But if you're more interested in when was a job created for the part that uses the stamp rather than the stamp itself, then a buyer code really wouldn't help because you're not creating PO suggestions for that, you're creating jobs. That's where a query would come in easier that says, you know, show me when there's a projected production of this part.
Mm-hmm.
And there maybe part class would make more sense. You have a part class called military lot control parts. You know, again, thinking of commonly used screens, phase inquiry shows all the demands and supplies by date. And the paper version of that, the time phase material requirements report, can be printed by part class. So if you could identify this part class or all those items that need that special investigation, you just run that time phase report for those parts, and if it's not too many to look at, you can just flip through the pages and say, oh, this one has a job that's scheduled this month.
Okay, because I know there would be a lot of, well, no, it wouldn't change it. The part numbers would stay the same. It would just generate a demand on it.
Right.
It wouldn't necessarily say what the lot number needs to be.
Right.
That you'd have to refer to the
Right.
drawing.
But you see, if the part was purchased item stock, then if the system, for whatever reason, thought that you could still use some that you've already got from prior months, you wouldn't necessarily get a PO suggestion. But if you called it non-stock, you would get a PO suggestion for every job that meets it. So it wouldn't say that in September I can use the one that's left over for July.
Okay. This is what kind of brought it up to me. The track lot is on these part screens.
Mm-hmm.
What does that do?
Okay, if you say track lots, then any inventory transaction, in or out of inventory, has to reference its lot. If you do a job receipt for inventory, it assumes that the lot number is going to be the same as the job number, but you can change it at that time. If it's a purchase part, a little window pops up and says, what's the lot number? You also, under the tab that says lots, you click on that tab. These are attributes that you can track for every lot. Now, I don't see anything in there that really represents month of manufacture, but maybe that's what the batch means. And the batch number would be 2015-09. That's everything in September 2015. But if you check batch, for instance, as the only attribute, then when you create a new lot for that number, a little window pops up and says, okay, what's the batch number?
Every time I create a job.
Every time you create a new lot.
Okay.
Now, I've worked with a actually not too far from here where they would create multiple lots per job. Because every day when they did a receipt, they had to give them a new lot because they went just to the month of manufacturers right through the day. So if I had a job for 30,000 parts that took 4 days to make, I might have 4 different lots on that one job. But then in the system, because I've got the lot, I know, okay, what was the manufacturing batch number? Maybe I'm tracking the heat number, the material. Maybe I'm tracking this other attribute. Could be just about anything you want, I suppose. And then whenever you move that inventory, let's say I've got to use that part, I'm going to issue it to a job. Okay, I need 5,000, and I've got a lot of 20,000 and a lot of 30,000. Which ones did I use when I pulled 5,000 out of inventory and issued them to a job? You identify which lot number, and then later when somebody comes back and says, okay, I had a problem with manufacturing lot number 2508. Where did you use that? You could do a search on your internal lot numbers that reference that manufacturing lot number, and you say, okay, that manufacturing lot number of raw material went into these lots of your finished goods, and you know what sales orders you shipped your finished goods on. You can track it right down to everything that you sent out that was made out of material that came from that manufacturer's batch.
Okay.
If you're tracking manufacturer's batch number. If you're not, then you're like, okay, well, I can find out that that sales order that I shipped, customer calls, I got a problem. Okay. I shipped that to that customer on this packing slip, and I picked it out of inventory with batch number 25. I look at the lot tracker for lot number 25, and it says it was manufactured on this specific date. This is the job number it used to manufacture that lot, and then I can go to that job and see what lot number of raw materials I issued to that lot of finished goods. So as long as you keep physical control to match what you're doing on the computer, you can track this down.
Okay.
Now, I worked at a place where they had lot control on steel tubing, and their lot number was tracking the manufacturer's heat number of the coil, but they had 3 tube mills next to each other, and guys were taking the tubes off of the mills and putting them all in the same exact rack. And the tubes themselves had nothing on them to show which machine they came off of, and each machine is running a different lot of material with different heat. But they showed their customer, look, I'm doing lot track. See, here's the lot number when I manufactured that stuff. But the physical piece of material wasn't necessarily really belonging to that lot. They were just doing the computer stuff and weren't following it physically.
Okay.
I'm not recommending you do that.
Oh, no, I understand that.
I'm saying that if you're not going to do the physical control with it, then you're kind of wasting your time doing the computer stuff.
Yeah, I was just looking for a way for it to kick out something that says, hey, this needs to get ordered for sure. This is something you need to look at, and that it looks like the PO suggestion is going to be the best way to do it at this point.
Right, because when the system is telling you that you got to buy more stuff, it's not concerned about what lot numbers you already have. It just says, do I have enough inventory? It assumes that every lot number, if it's the same part number, it's all interchangeable. But if you call it a non-stock part, then it says I need 5,000. Excuse me, 5,000 for this job in September, and I need 6,000 for a different job in October. And because they're on different purchase order numbers, I can, on that purchase order, tell the people that are making that head stamp, this is the head stamp I want. And when that PO is received, you physically mark it, this is the head stamp for job number F8109, which is going to be run in September. And when they grab that head stamp, it's got the September code on it, because it was purchased specifically for that use and they're not supposed to use it anywhere else. But when you're done, it doesn't go back in inventory. You know, at the end of September, that thing isn't done. Now, can you send those stamps back and have a different code put on them? I don't know if that makes sense.
Yeah.
You know, it could, then you'd probably buy a head stamp machine and just make your own here and do it as part of the job setup.
Okay, so this finish hammer insert right here then, right now, with the way that it's set up, it's the class is tooling. We should change it probably to something that's like a tooling lot controlled or lot embossed, or just some sort of a class that sets it apart from the other ones for printing off when it's on a job. Correct. So that we can single it out from all the other finish hammer inserts.
You could.
Order specific.
But if, yeah, I think we're kind of mixing solutions here. If you use the non-stock to run that, that's on the part level. You wouldn't necessarily need a different part class for that. I was suggesting a different part class so that you would look at the time phase to figure out which items are required. So if it's a non-stock, then I'm going to have a unique PO suggestion, and I don't have to go to time phase for that.
Okay. I misunderstood you there for a second, but okay. So if we make this a non-stock item, it's going to generate a demand for it no matter what.
Right.
The
In other words, if you go to, I don't know, do you have demands for that part in the system now?
No.
Okay.
This one does not, as far as I know, these do not generate demands. They're on the thing.
They should still create demands. Just right click on it, open time phase. Yeah, there's a whole bunch of demands there.
Yes, it does generate demands.
Yeah, the phantom is just a way of getting it on the job. If it's on that list, on the material list on the job, it should show in time phase. Now these fractions, is that based on projected usage?
Yes. Because they are stated that the parent quantity is like 0.000030.
Right.
So it has to get used so many times.
Right. So that first demand we see there for 0.5 of the tool for job number 28498, that's basically saying that that job is large enough that you're going to use half the expected life of that tool.
Yes.
Okay. And then two rows further down, you've got a different job, one of the ones that we just created for a test. We're going to take a tenth of that tool, and the next one below is another tenth. And eventually, your on-hand balance is going to be below negative, or below zero, and that's going to be there on 416. So then if we ran MRP, it would kick out another job then to make more. Now, I see suggestions there of 0.5 each. See those? These two things here. You may want to change your, put some kind of a multiple or something on that so that it's always generating a full quantity. Because you're not going to buy half of these. You're always going to buy at least.
No, we'd always buy a full one.
But if you gave it a multiple of 1, anything is divisible by 1. So that doesn't help. If you called it 2, then it would always order at least 2, but you don't really want to order 2 if you can get just 1. So I think the proper thing here would have been to assign a part number that does not allow decimals, but it's too late because you've already been using that unit of measure, and that unit of measure allows decimals. But if somebody gets a PO suggestion to buy a half, they're just going to manually bump it up to 1.
We're able to set a minimum order quantity.
There you go. Minimum order quantity of 1.
We can set that to 1.
Yep.
No matter what, they always have to order 1 if it comes up.
But it might tell you to order 1.5.
Well, no matter what for these ones, we'd have to order just 1. If it's anything like 1.5, they'll know to order 2.
Right. But if the job, okay, if you have 2 requirements within the same month, you probably only need 1 tool unless they're very big jobs, right?
Yes. Unless the jobs are really big and the amount of times that the finish hammer insert gets hit depicts how long the life of it's going to be. So yeah.
Right. So if you had a PO suggestion that was due towards the end of 1 month, it's probably for production the next month and at that point you have to say change the code.
Mm-hmm.
But you may have to say change the code as part of the comments on the PO, because you're using the same number for that head for every month of the year.
Mm-hmm.
You don't want to create a unique number for every month of the year and then have all those revision masters that says this thing, if I make it in October, needs a part number with the October date. The one in November is a different one. Yeah, the whole tooling, you can go a long ways with the basic system, but it's really not designed as a tooling management system, and therefore, because of the whole thing about consumable items and different work life involved, it's just not handled elegantly enough before.
All right, so when we create these sort of finish hammer inserts, then see all the other ones already generate stuff too.
Right. Now, if you created if you set that part as non-stock, and you ended up with 3 jobs requiring it all in the same month, you'll get 3 PO suggestions. And if you decide that the jobs are small enough that one tool can be used for all 3, then you could take the second and third jobs that are scheduled that month and check the component on that job is already issued. And then the system won't keep telling you to buy a standalone tool just for that job. But it's still on the bill of material for the job so that people know that that's the head they're supposed to use.
Okay. Looks like a non-stock item is most likely the way I'm going to end up going. I'll have to go back now to see how many parts are there.
Now, are you costing or applying the cost of this to the first job that uses it, the entire cost? Or are you amortizing it on a per use basis? In other
That's
words,
a great.
that tool costs you, let's say that tool costs you $100.
Yeah.
You would issue it to the first job at $100. That job would take a $100 cost. And then if there's enough life left that I can use on the next job, if I don't issue it at all to the next job, then it won't have any. But if I issue it to the job, it'll throw another $100 on it, and I didn't use $100 because that was all allocated to the first job.
I wish I could answer that question, but I'm not sure how they do it over there.
Yeah. Thinking through the way the system works, you could issue the entire tool to the first job.
Mm-hmm.
It takes the entire $100 and throws it on there. And then after you're finished running the job and you decide that this tool still has 1/3 of its life left, you can do a return to stock of 1/3, and it'll take $33 of cost off of that job.
Yeah. And
then later you issue the remaining 1/3 to the next job, and it gets $33. And if you totally use that up and then need another tool, then you issue another tool, and another $100 goes on it.
Yeah.
And then when I'm done with that, I return that 3/4 to inventory, and then it takes that dollars off. You could do that if you wanted to do that. A lot of companies do, let's say, the first job that uses that tool gets the full cost,
Yeah.
and everything else is just freebies until that part's
been used up. Yeah, and I have a feeling that's most likely the way we do it, because that would just be a lot of keystrokes back and forth from our side.
Especially if that part was originally costed and you figured your selling price based on using up a full tool.
Mm-hmm.
Hey guys, this is Grace. Can I ask a question?
Mm-hmm.
I've been sitting back and I've been listening to this whole discussion.
All of a sudden, is R2D2 with you? That's what it sounds like all of a sudden.
No.
I'm getting kind of a weird echo distortion. We can't understand what you're saying.
Can you dial hang up and dial back in? Is that fine?
That's Grace. I thought she said.
Yeah, that was
Grace.
That was Grace. She's sitting at her desk, so I don't know if there's an issue with the headset she's using or.
Okay.
Did it sound distorted to you guys too?
Yeah, big time.
Okay. I want to make sure it wasn't my phone.
Oh, it's more than your fault. I can go get her and see if she wants to come in the conference room and ask her questions.
Okay.
Pretty easy.
Yeah, here she comes.
Here she comes is right. She's trying to walk and chew bubblegum. Okay, here's my question to you. I used to be a buyer, okay, so I'm hearing you talking about the tool. Well, first of all, I'm not really thinking that it should be assigned to a job, but since they already do it, I'm not going to argue that point. My question to you is this. Aren't you actually duplicating the overhead burden because of the fact that you are reassigning it and you're costing it against a job? You've already got that tool built into the burden calculation because that's part of your overhead of running that equipment.
Okay. The way it was structured, that tool was a material. So the system would be putting it in the material cost, not the burden. So if you calculated your burden for the overall machine resource based on tool usage, then I would think that all of your tooling part numbers, you would change the costing method to standard and give it a standard cost of 0. Because if you leave it as a cost method of average, then when you pay your supplier for the tool, it would recalculate the average cost, and then when you use it on the job, it would be adding cost to it. If you never issue the material to the job, you wouldn't be adding any cost. But then you've got the scenario where the system is keep telling you to buy more tools until you finally close that job. You know,
That's specific only to that particular job, period.
It's a one-time purchase.
Well, if the part is set up as a non-stock, then yes, that purchase order would be tied to that specific job. Right now, they're not non-stock, but it's still saying that the part is required to be issued to that job. And if you never issue it, then when you go to close the job, you're going to have some type of a material variance that said, I never issued these parts. And so the system thinks that that's an error of omission, that someone must have used those parts because the bill says you need them, but you never issued it.
Are they doing that on every single job that they're running at that facility?
Just a support.
Are we
Are you
doing
assigning tooling? Are they assigning tooling on all the other jobs as well?
Yeah, all of our bill of materials, like what you see on the screen right now, everything gets that sort of a bill of material when it comes to any sort of a nut or a bolt job. So we assign part numbers, of course, according to the sizes and shapes and everything else, and all the parts that require the lock controlled, I guess you could say, finish hammers, like material number 90 there, all of those have different letters engraved into them for all the different military required lock controlled items.
Oh, so it's job specific, period. Okay. So when I was thinking insert, I was thinking a tooling insert per se. You're actually saying it's actually a type of a die
Yeah.
Okay.
So no matter what, regardless of what the tool life is on that finish hammer, it's only going to get used for a particular job, whether we use the entire life of it or we only use a tenth of the life of that finish hammer. Once we get done with that job, that finish hammer is no longer good unless we have more parts in the same part.
Something else is echoing. Okay.
A little hip hop going there.
No kidding.
So does that clarify your question there, Grace?
Yeah, it did. In my lifespan, an insert is, yeah, I didn't realize it was a particular, like a stamped die. So I'm thinking of it as an insert is something that's part of a normal tool that you are ongoing and is interchangeable. And to me, that's a standard overhead, and so it's part of the burden. But obviously, that I wasn't correct. So I understand.
Yeah, when it comes to, I want to say a majority of the items that we make at Berea, all the hammers, they get their description.
Yours is worse.
Yours is worse.
Where they get all their engravings and they stay the same. They don't change. It's only these military lot controlled items that we have to designate on paperwork when we ship it to the customer that they have to be controlled with certain numbers or letters.
Okay, that makes sense.
Now, when we looked at that job tracker earlier today for that completed job, it looked like most of these were never issued.
Which they probably are.
You remember there's a green check on the first material and everything else, nothing else had a green check.
Yeah.
So. Okay. Could you, out of curiosity, look at part tracker for, let's say that third one, the HD 11099, whatever.
HDI, the header.
Yeah. Yeah, right-click on it in the grid view. Yeah, and go to General and then Costs. Yeah, okay, so there's no cost on it. So there's that costing ID that I was looking at down there. I couldn't for you yesterday. I found it. Okay. Well, apparently this part was never actually received in inventory, or it was zero cost on the sale on the purchase order, and that's probably not correct. So whether I issue it or not, it's not adding anything to the cost. I think I would have changed the costing method to standard just to make sure that I don't accidentally add cost to the job if it's already being rolled up into the burden rate. Go back to the Parts tab on that second row. Quality bearing. Okay. Open time phase on that. Yep. Okay. And then scroll down. Okay, I guess that is everything there. Okay, so I don't show any real purchase orders for it yet, just suggestions. Right-click on it and open with Purchase Advisor. Purchase it before. Okay, so there's no history at all on this insert. I'm assuming you actually use this thing. You actually have bought them.
We have.
You're probably buying them then as an expense deal, and not actually running it through as under that part number.
That's a great question. I'm not sure. I do know that we have them. I do know that they exist. I've seen where they are kept in our tooling crib. Now, how they do the purchasing of them, how they do the ordering of them, that I do not know.
Try transaction history tracker. Retrieve. Yeah, nothing at all came up. So it looks like you're using that part number on the bill of material, and it's probably referenced on some drawing somewhere. But when you're actually buying it and putting it in the tool room, you're not doing anything enough work for that. Because if you had, it would have shown up on here. Even if you would have just bought it as an expense item, I think it would have shown up if you used that part number. Could be wrong there.
Yeah.
But the part is set as a quantity-bearing part. So if you created a part number with that part number, it would have defaulted to be purchase for inventory. It wouldn't let you make that an expense account or expense deal. Interesting. Okay, any other questions before we break for lunch? I guess not. Okay, let's do the same thing we did yesterday, and try to get back together about 1 o'clock, and we'll probably be all wrapped up by 3. Okay. See you all this afternoon.